Welcome to the Dire Wolf Show, where we believe that America is exceptional and that our constitutional rights should never be infringed. I am Dire Wolf. On our show, we bring you the truth and debunk fake news. If you love laughing at the insanity of the regressive left, sit back and relax. Boy, do I have a show for you. Welcome back, Wolfpack. Dire Wolf here, avatar of national defense, for the weekly news recap behind enemy lines on YouTube, where speech is not free and the truth is demonetized. I think we were going to edit that, but I forgot about it. Alongside me is my co-host, Fox Travis, the avatar of math, because, yes, we can be the avatars for concepts now. How you doing, buddy?
Not too bad, though Skype appears to be very ill, and I don't like what's happening.
Ill in the cool way, or ill like not healthy?
Ill in I think Skype is just a virus, and I don't know why we keep using it, because it sucks. There's absolutely nothing redeeming about Skype other than sometimes it carries my voice from where I'm at to where Dire's at, and sometimes it carries his voice back, but not all the time.
The only regular thing with Skype is that we complain about it.
Yes.
Is that it sucks in every possible way,
and there's
we still use
hundreds of other options available to us, but for some reason we keep not changing.
Yes, we should definitely take a long, hard look at ourselves after this show and evaluate why we suck so bad.
I agree.
All right. Thank you for everyone who makes this show possible. This is all your fault, and I hope you have the appropriate level of shame for that. Kaylet, Ori Bane, Nathan, Cameron, Tetris Freak, Slowpoke, Thundra Erican, who is female, all your fault. White Lion, and I hope you and Timberwolf, thank you very much for all the donations and support. If you guys want to help us out, you can also like, share, subscribe, or donate to us financially.
There's someone else that you forgot too, Dire.
Adder Lupus?
No. Well, probably, but
Nazi fags.
There we go. Okay.
I guess they support us too. Because you're one. Anyways, we got a lot of news to get through, so let's get right into it.
Okay, so our first story is we're not close to when it was breaking, but it is still a clear and present story. And I think that it'll be a very important story moving forward for the at least next year, probably throughout the entire
Nazi fags.
How dare you?
Juicy
Why would you do that?
Adelupus, $5, thank you. He says he saw a bit of Trump's speech earlier today. Glad to hear him finally speaking again. Didn't get to hear much of him though. Through my grandma hates him and changed the channel. Well, how dare she?
How dare you?
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much for the $5. And I'm sure you'll be able to catch him on YouTube on some kind of replay. All righty. Yep. So, we have this story is vast and complicated. We're not going to be able to hope to get through the entire thing tonight. But we just kind of wanted to give you guys kind of the brief core of the story, this new information that's coming out about January 6th, because it's highly important, and it's a story that's very concerning for the future of this country and for the remainder of the Biden administration. So, contrary to how we normally do stuff, we are going to be mostly reading this pre-prepared news article, and then we'll comment on it afterwards. But we wanted to, because it's such a complicated piece of information, such a complicated story, we kind of wanted to just give it direct from the people that already they did the investigation, they did the research, they compiled it once. Trying to convert it into some kind of paraphrased third hand, there'd be too much information lost, and it just wouldn't make any sense. So that's why we're going to read directly from the source. Alrighty, so Revolver News. So, all right. This came out about 2 weeks ago, June 14th. Let's see. The title of it is "Unindicted Co-Conspirators in the January 6th case raised disturbing questions of federal foreknowledge." All right. So, unindicted co-conspirators in the January 6th riots There's disturbing questions about what did the federal government know and when did they know it. So, article begins. Of all the questions asked, words spoken, and ink spilled on the so-called Capitol siege of January 6, 2021, none held the key to the entire event quite like what Senator Amy Klobuchar asked of Christopher Wray. The Democrat from Minnesota asked the Trump-appointed FBI director, did the federal government infiltrate any of the so-called militia organizations claimed to be responsible for planning and executing the Capitol siege? Which, a lot of stuff, a lot of assumptions on that question that she asked there because, this assumption that it was actually like a siege, implying that it was a well-organized kind of military activity. We can watch this video here real quick of her asking him that question.
And they show up, we now know in this complaint, with encrypted two-way Chinese radios and military gear, there must be moments where you think, if we would have known, if we could have infiltrated this group or found out what they were doing. And that, do you have those moments?
Absolutely. I will tell you, Senator, and this is something I feel passionately about, that anytime there's an attack, our standard at the FBI is we aim to bat 1,000, right? And we aim to thwart every attack that's out there. So anytime there's an attack, especially one that's this horrific, that strikes right at the heart of our system of government, right at the time the transfer of power is being discussed, you can be darn tootin' that we are focused very, very hard on how can we get better sources, better information, better analysis, so that we can make sure that something like what happened on January 6th never happens again.
Okay.
Oh, wow. So I want to remind you of a previous related instance, if you don't mind, about Michigan. So there was 13 individuals that were involved in a plan.
Yeah, let's put a pin in that part.
We'll come back to it?
We will definitely come
cool.
back to that.
Okay, so Christopher Wray is able to uncomfortably weasel his way out of answering that question directly, partially because Klobuchar does him the courtesy of not asking the question directly. Klobuchar instead asked the FBI director if he wishes he had infiltrated the militia organizations allegedly involved in the Jan 6, assuming from the outset that there was, in fact, no infiltration, thereby approving the FBI director, or providing the FBI director an easy way to avoid addressing the question one way or another. In the year leading up to Jan 6 and during the Jan 6 itself, it was to what extent were the three primary militia groups, the Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys, and the 3 Percenters, infiltrated by agencies of the federal government or informants of said agencies, is the question she should have asked, that direct question, rather than giving that easy out. She also should have asked exactly how many federal undercover agents or confidential informants were present at the Capitol or in the Capitol during the infamous, quote, siege, and what roles they play, merely passive informants or active instigators, because it really matters. It really would paint a different picture knowing exactly how many of the few hundred people inside that building were actually FBI agents, and which were they the ones that were causing the damage or encouraging people to take actions, or were they simply sitting back and watching? That really matters to the context of the cases against the individuals being prosecuted. And to determine exactly how much real threat there was. Was it an imagined threat created by the FBI, or were they simply watching an actual threat? Finally, she should have asked, of all of the unindicted co-conspirators referenced in the charging documents of those indicted for the crimes on Jan 6, how many worked as confidential informants or as undercover operatives for the federal government, FBI, Army, counterintelligence, etc.?
All right, they continue. Revolver News continues. From now on, all discussions of January 6th must give way to laser-like focus on the questions above, with an unwavering persistence at obtaining the answers. In the narrative about January 6th does not conform to the questions above. The American people will never learn the most important truth about what January 6th is and what kind of country they are really living in.
If it turns out that the federal government did in fact have undercover agents or confidential informants embedded within the so-called militia groups and indicted for conspiring to obstruct the Senate confirmation on Jan 6, the implication would be nothing short of seismic. Essentially, if such agents or informants enjoyed extremely senior level positions within such groups, they would then have been involved in directing those actions. One of the key consensus points among the FBI and DOJ and the regime media is the idea that while the Jan 6 is primarily the fault of Trump supporting QAnon infused domestic terrorists, in quotes, it is secondarily the fault of the so-called intelligence failures that allowed it to happen.
Yes, because in theory, we think there's a lot of evidence that the FBI was pretty deeply infiltrated into the various militia, quote unquote, militia groups that were there on January 6th, and yet at the same time, the FBI says they didn't know anything about it, which they can't both be true. All right, so Revolver News continues. Klobuchar's own questions on the at the March 2nd, 2021 FBI hearing above reinforces this intelligence failure narrative, but she is not alone. A 5-month bipartisan Senate investigation recently arrived at the same, quote, intelligence failure narrative to explain the breach of the Capitol and the associated events on January 6th. It's just, government's just they're just a bunch of goofy idiots. They don't know what's going on. They can't possibly be expected to have provided, the Federal Investigation Bureau. They couldn't possibly be held to account to investigate possible problems.
They've been monitoring those groups for a very long time. Those are not new groups. They've been established and monitored by the FBI for a very long time. I don't believe for a second that that they were unaware of their intention to be at that rally and then to go to the Capitol.
Yep. So Revolver's got an excerpt about the Senate investigation report, because as we remember, after Biden got in, they ordered a Senate investigation into what happened on that day. They wanted the 9/11 Commission report, basically, and that did come out recently, and so this is what they've been referencing. All right, so an excerpt about that report is from ABC News. Is a bipartisan Senate investigation of the January 6th of the deadly January. Which actually, that's not true.
It's not. Well, I mean, only one person died. They were killed by a Capitol police officer. It was Aisha Babbitt, or what was it?
Alicia Ashley Babbitt.
Ashley Babbitt. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't know why you gave it like a weird twang. All right, so bipartisan Senate investigation of the deadly January 6th insurrection found security and intelligence failures at every level of government that led to the breach of the Capitol by a pro-Trump mob, as lawmakers in a joint session were certifying the 2020 election. Man, there's a lot of lies in that sentence. All right, so the 95-page report of a product of the roughly 5-month joint probe by the Senate Homeland Security and Senate Rules Committee found significant breakdowns ranging from, quote, from federal intelligence agencies failing to warn of the potential violence to a lack of planning and preparation by the U.S. Capitol and law enforcement leadership. I don't know. That doesn't really sound like a failure of intelligence. That just sounds like a failure of people to do their job. Like, they got the intelligence. They had the capability of preparing for something based on that intelligence, and it looks like they just didn't. I don't know if that's an intelligence failure.
How does that explain them ushering people into the building? Is that intelligence failure as well?
I guess. I mean, what is intelligence? Is it like infrastructure where like everything law enforcement does is considered intelligence?
Maybe. But is it how smart the people are? Is it like, is it an intelligence failure for a police officer to have a negligent discharge and kill someone?
As much as I want to make that joke, I do want to reiterate the word intelligence in this context. So they're talking about like intel about.
I know.
Yeah,
it's a joke.
I know. I just it's so there's a lot of words in here, and it's like trying to like make sure it stays cogent as to what we're trying to talk about. That is kind of funny though. Alrighty. Let's see here. So they continue. There was no overall operation or staffing plan for that fateful day. A total failure of leadership, according to the committees. Well, that doesn't sound like an intelligence failure. That sounds like a leadership failure.
Yeah. And who's in leadership?
Nancy.
Is it Oh, there you go. So if it turns out that the federal government, FBI, Army, intelligence, or other similar agencies had undercover agents or confidential informants embedded in any of the groups involved in the Jan 6, the federal intelligence agencies failing to warn of a potential for violence looks less like an innocent mistake and more like something more sinister, like it was intentional, that they wanted there to be a violent incident. And if that was what they wanted and all they got was the only death was caused by them shooting someone, then I mean, it's quite impressive that they tried to instigate, possibly, allegedly, a violent riot, and all they got was peaceful protest. But unlike,
hot take, you can have an FBI agent sit outside any mosque in America, and he can find somebody to radicalize and get them to do something. You get the whole FBI going out all across all of America, trying as hard as they can to get what they think are white supremacists to attack the Capitol with guns, and they can't do it. They just can't. They couldn't possibly do it.
Yeah, no one showed up with weapons. No one actually attacked any officers. You look at the videos; they're actually being fairly peaceful with those officers. However, they call them a mob, but they don't call all of the rioters for 18 months who've been destroying cities and attacking people. They don't call them a mob. They call them peaceful protesters.
How surveilled do you think DC is?
Very. Cameras are everywhere.
You remember that story about that pipe bomb on January 5th?
Yeah.
And it just what
disappeared.
happened to that story? That story just went just out into the ether, just totally gone, just gone forever, just never happened.
So you know when there was an actual pipe bombing and they were sent to CNN, there was a pipe bomb sent to CNN, and they had a bunch of pictures of it, and it was made available, and everyone could see this. It actually existed, even though it wasn't functional, right? It was meant to scare someone. It wasn't actually a functional bomb. Why don't we have that?
Yeah, and it's funny because I believe that bomb had like a bunch of like Trump rhetoric all over it, like really obvious, like that it was meant to be a frame job. So and that's what the story is about to kick into. Is there's a lot of things that happened that day, a lot of very violent people that were verified to be violent that were arrested, and they are not facing charges. That's kind of the whole point of this article. And like similar to that pipe bomb, there's all kinds of these big things that happened that we heard about that day, but then some of the stories just disappeared. They went away. They got the horn hat guy. They got a couple of grandmas. They got them arrested. They beat up an old guy in one of the DC jails who's being held on trespassing for 6 months. But some of these other people, they just no charges.
Horn hat guy was actually telling people not to break things. But someone who actually was breaking things, who was smashing windows and encouraging violence, well, he was not jailed. He was an unindicted co-conspirator. Why was that? Was he an agent? So moving on. Indeed, in the federal government, if the federal government knew of a potential for violence or around in or around the Capitol on Jan 6 and failed to call for heightened security, may in fact be legally liable for the damages incurred during that day. Maybe even more liable if they did it themselves.
Well, it's a little bit of a problem when the government's running false flag attacks against itself.
Who pays for it?
That tends to be
it's a logistical nightmare.
Well, it tends to be a foreshadowing of a problem. when the
Hey,
government's running false flag attacks against itself.
There was another country that did a false flag against itself to try to demonize a portion of its populace. Who was that?
It was the one that wasn't China. All right, so Revolver News
Bingo.
continues. It is unsettling to entertain the possibility that the federal government knew of a potential for violence on January 6th and did nothing to stop it. It presents the question, why would agencies or certain elements within sit back and let something like this happen on purpose?
A still more disturbing possibility arises from a careful study of the unindicted co-conspirator listing throughout the various charging documents of individuals facing the most serious charges related to Jan 6.
Revolver News continues. We at Revolver News have noticed a pattern from our now months-long investigation into January 6th, and in particular from our meticulous study of the charging documents related to those incidents, or to those indicted, sorry. In many cases, the unindicted co-conspirators appear to be much more aggressive and egregious participants in the so-called conspiracy, serving as the basis for the charging those indicted, of those indicted. So basically what they're saying is that looking through all of the publicly available arrest records and the publicly available charging records, from what Revolver News can see, the people who were initially arrested for much more violent behavior seem to have gotten the lesser sentences or no charges at all. And the people who were arrested for low-level stuff, just like the trespassing, who have been in jail for...
Just being in the building, by the way, is what that means.
Yeah. So that is where this pattern that Revolver News, and that's what the basis of this article is for, and that's what the basis of this idea that perhaps the FBI and other federal agencies were stirring the pot on purpose, and they allowed the pot to boil over on purpose so that there was what happened on January 6th. That was, to a large extent, planned by the FBI and executed by the FBI and instigated by the FBI, is essentially what the current theory is. And again, you saw how much effort the FBI put into hunting people down after January 6th. They were looking through cameras. They even knocked down some doors in random states and arrested people who just happened to look similar to people that were in D.C. that day. People who weren't even at the Capitol but were just in D.C. on that day have been tracked down and arrested. You've got a lot of people that were arrested for just trespassing who were, there's video of them being invited in by the Capitol Police saying, okay, you're come on right this way. And then they get arrested for trespassing. Meanwhile, you've got people who are on video, punching cops, breaking windows, vandalizing things. And from what Revolver News is reporting, those more egregious acts that day are not being charged with anything. And what happens when you have an undercover an agent that is undercover infiltrating something like a militia, if there is crimes that go on, they get arrested like everyone else so that they don't blow their cover, but then they're never charged because they were there doing it on behalf of the government. Which I guess in their minds isn't really a crime. So that's what Revolver News is getting this theory from, is because there's a bunch of people who are committing violent acts, but they weren't charged. The only logical reason that they wouldn't be charged is that they couldn't be, because to be charged would reveal them as would blow their cover as an FBI agent.
The only other explanation for why someone will be not charged because they signed an agreement to not be charged if they gave information on others, but that would not look like this, because usually they would make the people who have lesser crimes, they would go to them and have them roll so that they could give information about the people who they're actually after, who had committed the bigger crimes. So like if you were to go after someone who had just done trespassing, you get them to not be charged if they would give the names of people who had actually planned violent things at the Capitol. That's how, when you're trying to to arrest a crime.
It's like a reverse kingpin operation.
Exactly.
So normally you would go arrest like a street drug dealer, and you'd make a deal with him that he doesn't get charges as long as he gives away his boss, and then you go to the boss and you do the same thing. And you try and get up to the big drug lord, right?
Right.
What the FBI appears to have been doing is getting the big drug lords and saying, "Big drug lords, we'll give you a free pass. Give us all your street dealers."
Which doesn't make sense.
Yes, it usually goes the other way. It usually goes little guys to big guys, not big guys to little guys.
And in this case, if you cared about actually protecting the community and enforcing the law, you'd want to actually prosecute and have the best case against those who actually committed violent actions, and you wouldn't care too much about people who had just done trespassing. But in this case, they're hyper-focused on punishing people severely who had done just trespassing, but they are willing to not prosecute people who had actually done the violent acts, which that is such a strange thing. Is not normally seen in law enforcement. That's why it gives a credence to the theory that these are likely actually informants.
Yep.
Or
Thank
agents.
you, Phil Rooftop, for the ice cream and the follow. Much appreciated.
Yes. So the question immediately arises as to why this is the case. And it forces us to consider whether certain individuals are being protected from indictment because they are involved in the Jan 6 undercover operations or confidential informants for the federal agencies.
Here it is useful to draw a distinction between two discrete categories of participants in the so-called Capitol siege. The first category is the group of mostly harmless tourists who walked through already open doors and already removed barricades, and at most were guilty of minor trespassing charges and light property offenses. The second group consists of those who were violent with the police officers, broke down the barricades, smashed the windows, belonged to a, quote, militia group, engaged in military-style planning prior to the event, discussed transporting heavy weapons, and so forth. So, again, the two categories is your grandmas, your flag wavers, people who were there to see Trump speak, just wandering around aimlessly, looking confused, being ushered in by Capitol Police, and the other group being those that you saw in the videos that were smashing down barricades, that were pushing cops around, that were smashing windows, that were stealing stuff out of Nancy Pelosi's office, and then people who had pre-planned their violent activities prior to arriving at the Capitol. And a big distinction between the pre-planners and the people who were just wandering about is look at their faces. If they look a little confused, if they look a little in shock and awe, or kind of, oh wow, look at me, I'm in the Capitol. Yeah, we've probably. Hopefully, if you're an American and you haven't been to the Capitol, I would recommend visiting it. It's a good time. Good to see your American history. But yeah, you walk around these big buildings, you kind of look around, your mouth is a little open, you're like, oh wow, man, this is really cool. But if you go in there and that's what you look like, you weren't planning to do anything bad. You were just wandering around. You're a tourist. The second group, though, they were there with purpose. They don't look confused. They're not wandering around. They have targets. They're walking around with purpose. They're doing things with purpose. So that's the distinction between the two groups here that they're trying to make. So Revolver continues. Up until now, the overwhelming, perhaps exclusive share of counter-establishment reporting on January 6th has focused on absolving the first group. And this is a valuable thing, trying to defend the grandmas and the confused old men. The notion that these harmless, quote, mega moms wandering around the Capitol were domestic terrorists engaged in an insurrection is absurd, obviously. That many of these people are being held in prison without bail under harsh conditions amounts to an unacceptable and outrageous abuse of basic human rights. So outrageous and abusive that even President Putin, is he a president or what is he?
He is the president, yes.
Yes, quote unquote president.
Nazi
Yeah, like
flags.
Kim
dare
Jong-un
you.
is a
Jews
president.
unique.
Why would you do that?
What if the FBI was itself the kingpin? What if they created the extremists just for this purpose? I am not saying the FBI are a bunch of spooky glow sticks. I am just saying Fox Mulder and the X-Files were probably based on a true story.
I think that's the point of this article. Thank you for that $10, Triumvirate. That's kind of the point of this article. Is that's what this is, at least alleging or showing evidence of, to the extent of how much did the FBI plan it. Is this a case where the FBI is just really stupid and they accidentally fomented what happened on January 6th, or was this a little bit more coordinated than we think? There's certainly evidence that the FBI was involved or that there was some kind of law enforcement involvement. Thank you for the ice cream. Was it Jim Jiff or Jimph? Did I just say a curse word? Thank you. Maybe it's Jim F. How about that? We'll go with that. Thank you for the ice cream. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
No, and I'll say it. I think after reading through this article, and there's some other events that have happened throughout the years, it kind of implies that the FBI sets up these targets, kind of gets them ginned up, gives them support, gives them kind of the
or does all the planning,
gives them materials, and then all of a sudden now they can go out and stop a terror attack that they in large part had a hand in helping with.
There's a great example of this. So in Michigan, Governor Whitmer had a plot to kidnap her and give her a mock trial. And originally the story mentioned that there was 13 individuals that were in on the plot. 10 of them were FBI agents. 3 of them were actual people. That were the marks of the FBI, and the FBI found them and gave them the planning, gave them the tools, told them when to go, what to do, and then sent these these 3 numbskulls out, and then arrested them after they had.
Yeah. So in fact, of the 5 people that were in the van, actually that went to a location where Governor Whitmer was, and they scoped her out, and they were planning. They were actually there looking at her with binoculars, planning to do something. There was, and this is all in the case files. We actually covered this last summer when it happened. But there was 5 people in that van, and 2 of them were FBI agents. 3 of them were not FBI agents. But when you've got a quote-unquote terror attack and almost half of the people in it are FBI agents, you gotta wonder what's going on there.
Yeah, but 13 people were involved in the planning and supplying of it. So like that is a gigantic proportion that is actually the FBI, right? So if that's what they do for one operation, where such a large portion of the planning and execution of it is FBI, how much of it would be, if you took the same proportions, would have been involved in the Capitol riot, right? So, however, the possibility that the federal government had undercover operatives or informants involved in the events of January 6th, from the planning to its execution, compels us to turn our attention to the second category of participants. The people who came there looked like they had prepared and had a plan and had the materials to go do something. Because if you were in the first category, if you were a government informant or a someone who was involved in the planning execution of the Capitol quote-unquote siege, you wouldn't be someone who just walked through aimlessly and with a clueless look on your face, right? You would be in the second category, someone who came there prepared with a plan to execute. So we are essentially interested in the unindicted co-conspirators who belong to any of the big 3 militia groups, the Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys, and the 3 Percenters. Indeed, it is these militia groups whose behavior, statements, and planning led up to and during the Jan 6 most closely aligned with the violent insurrectionists caricature we hear about in the media, and which the government claims to be going after in its aggressive
I will again reiterate, militia groups, if they want to call them militia groups, nobody in D.C. was found to have had a weapon. There was tens of thousands of people in and around the area that day. There's still no reports that were guns of any kind were picked up from anybody that was there, whether they were peaceful or not. So, they can label these guys militias all they want, but typically a militia would, keep and bear arms under the Second Amendment. So whether, Dyer's in the military, but when he goes to get milk at the grocery store, he's not necessarily there in his capacity as a soldier. So, you can be a part of a militia group and still go protest, not in your capacity as part of the militia, or not in a malicious, I don't mean it that way. Not in your capacity as acting as the militia. You can still go there as a regular person, as a civilian. If you are in a militia group, you're typically training, but if you're doing a militia operation, which we haven't had any on American soil for quite a few decades now, you're typically going to be using a gun. That's like the point of the militia, and that's one of the few laws that's like specified in the Constitution, is that like for the militia to operate, it was known that they would require arms under the Second Amendment. So if these guys were part of a militia group, that's great. Like, I was part of a fraternity, but just because I'm somewhere doing something doesn't mean I'm there in my capacity as that group. So I would think that to be somewhere in your capacity as a militia member, you would have to have a weapon with you. Otherwise,
so there actually is an example. I'm sorry to correct you. There has been a couple examples of the militia actually taking action as a group officially with militia leadership leading squads at some of the protests in the last 4 years. And what they do is they go out there as a team, and they have firearms and ammunition and the plate carriers, and they go there with a mission, like, we're going to provide security to prevent violence. We're not supporting any political group. We're just there to provide support so there isn't violence.
So my deeper point, I see what you're saying. My deeper point was that they didn't come with weapons, though. So, like,
right,
while they have done stuff at other places with weapons, they didn't show up at DC with the weapons.
And that's not what we saw here. So it's not a militia operation.
Exactly. They're just there.
I also want to point out that we're both tripping over this because we keep seeing the article wrote Jan 6th as 1/6.
Yeah,
and
I keep wanting to read it as 1/6, and then I have to read it as Jan 6th, and then after
which doesn't
I
always
say
fit
it,
grammatically.
Well, and then after I say it, I keep wondering, did I say Jan or June 6th? And then I just don't want to sound like an idiot, and then in my attempt to not sound like an idiot, I sound like I can't read, which is true, but I don't want you guys to know that. All right, where we leave off here?
Oh, right here.
Is it my turn? Okay, so, all right, so there's more to this article, and this is on Revolver News. The article is titled "Federal Foreknowledge of January 6th. Unindicted co-conspirators raise disturbing questions." So if you guys want to go out and read the rest of this article, I don't know if you guys can see no, you guys can't on that, but we are like a sixth of the way through this article. But this is kind of like the cap paragraph that we're leaving off on. We'll read through that. But we definitely encourage you guys to go out and read the rest of this, because the rest of the article kind of goes down, breaks up the investigation document that the Senate, the 5-month investigation that the Senate did, that produced a 95-page report. They kind of go through that, break it apart, and there's this whole part that we read is kind of the preamble, and it's proposing this theory that the FBI seems to have been heavily involved in, or at least the intelligence agencies seem to have been heavily involved in the planning and in the actual violence. This is alleging that officers of the intelligence agencies actually were participating themselves in the violence on January 6th. This is all kind of the preamble to that. The rest of this article, which it would take us another 5 hours to get through, does go through with a lot of evidence as to specifics that they're finding, that they're talking about. So we definitely encourage you guys to go out there and read the rest of this so that you can get that. We're more kind of showing you guys that this information exists, and then we're going to discuss, after I read this paragraph here, kind of discuss the ramifications of that for the country. All right, so if it turns out that an extraordinary percentage of members of these groups involved in the planning and execution of the Capitol siege were federal informants or undercover operatives, the implications would be nothing short of staggering. This would be far worse than the already bad situation of the government knowing about the possibility of violence and doing nothing. Instead, this would imply that elements of the federal government were actively instigators in the most egregious and spectacular aspects of January 6th, amounting to a monumental entrapment scheme used as a pretext to imprison otherwise harmless protesters at the Capitol, and, in a much larger sense, used to frame the entire MAGA movement as potential domestic terrorists. This is what is at stake in getting to the bottom of January 6th. So,
in no uncertain terms, if the federal government were the ones who planned and actually took action to remove the barricades, if the Capitol Police had ushered these people in and they were only allowed access because of federal agents allowing them in and ushering them in, and then they arrest them and hold them in solitary confinement in horrible conditions, sometimes causing abuse to them. This is a massive human rights violation, and every last one of their charges should be thrown out because of entrapment, and they are owed a whole lot of money in damages, and the officers and agents involved should be in jail in their place.
well, who's going to put them in jail?
That's what should happen, and it would require you and I are on the same page with dissolving the FBI. They have shown themselves in the last 4 years to be a criminal cabal who have been subverting our democracy, doing stuff like this. This is nothing less than a coup, or a furthering of the coup that was already in place. They had did an investigation based off of lies that they themselves created to call Trump a foreign agent of Russia, and they continued that investigation knowing from the very beginning it was something that they made up themselves. They lied to the American people. They cost us millions. It was millions of the millions, right? Millions of dollars. They sowed division in our country. They affected the vote. They were manipulating our democracy, and then they are actually throwing their political rivals in jail. This is a false pretext to arrest those that were the most supportive of Trump.
Well, yeah, and it was in an effort as well, as I said, just paint the entire all the political support for Trump, paint it as domestic terrorism. This is kind of the MO of the Democrats, and it's really it's really kind of the MO of a lot of authoritarian regimes is you reframe extremism as normal, commonplace, calm, correct things to do that extremist political movements are okay to do. And then they'll criticize regular, normal people as they're the extremists. You saw this in essentially every single communist takeover in Latin America and Asia the last century. You saw it with the way the Nazis handled stuff. You saw it with the way Russia handled stuff, or the Soviet Union handled stuff. It was taking normal, regular people who just wanted stuff to continue on as the way it always had. They were the domestic terrorists, the political extremists, and then the new people who were burning down all their stuff had all these crazy radical ideas about what races should be together, and how we should be teaching kids, and what the role in science and religion and all that stuff was, and what the role of government is, and micromanaging every aspect of your life. That's not radical. That's just regular, common, normal stuff. So the Democrats have framed just regular conservatism, America first, patriotism as that is domestic terrorism, and burning down small businesses, causing billions of dollars of damage due to rioting across hundreds of cities this summer, supporting voter fraud, micromanaging every aspect of your life, instituting communist policies and Marxist ideology into our military, into our school system, all across our government. That's not radical. That's not extreme. That's just normal, common, everyday stuff. And if you oppose that, then you're the domestic terrorist, not them.
Yes. I also want to point out that it wasn't just the FBI that were instigating violence on Jan 6. Do you remember the Antifa leader John Early Sullivan, who was there saying he was a journalist, but he has video of himself threatening the police and encouraging people to take violent action.
Yeah, so we played him back when this happened, but he ended up being the person who had the clearest video footage of Ashley Babbitt being executed by Capitol Police. And watching his full video, and we went over this on the show back at the time, but essentially kind of recapping what we saw in that video, and you guys can go, his YouTube channel is Jaden X, because he thinks he's got a cool name or whatever. But what you see is a group of people with Jaden pushing his way to the front of them. They're in a hallway. There's a closed door. There's Capitol Police blocking the door, saying, okay, you can't go any further because this hallway takes you to the Senate chambers. Jaden, he's taking his own video of himself doing this. He pushes his way to the front of the group, acting as though he's some kind of leader. He talks with the Capitol Police, convinces them that if they don't leave, that there'll be problems, there'll be violence, they might get injured. He ends up talking them into walking away from the door. As soon as they walk away from the door, Jaden commands, says, okay, go for it, start breaking down the glass, and people do. Jaden instigated that. 30 seconds after that, a shot rings out through the door and kills Ashley Babbitt. So that was Jaden is or whatever you said his name is. He was a known Antifa operative. He had started several Antifa organizations. He was active in Antifa organizations all throughout the country. So that was right off the bat. We knew that day, okay, there's Antifa operatives in this thing that were instigating violence. What else is there? It seems to me that there was kind of a, whether it was planned or just a coincidence, there was a lot of other groups there, non-conservative groups, non-militia groups that were there that were instigating violence and then just making it look like that was MAGA and Patriots.
And another reason why you should believe it's not MAGA Patriots who are actually committing violence is because if they really are supporters of Trump, what did Trump say before they even went over to the Capitol? So Trump's speech ended with him saying, go home in peace. Not even in his regular speech on Jan 6, he told them to go home in peace. And then they went into the Capitol. So if they are Trump supporters, I highly doubt that they are the type that would be bashing in windows and destroying things after he had given them the direction to go home.
Now, again, I don't want to get us blamed or anybody to look at us and say, oh, well, you're not looking at it honestly or anything like that. Was there people there on January 6th that supported Trump, that were conservatives, that were MAGA or militia, that probably broke something? Yeah. Probably punched a cop? Probably. Are we saying that everybody there was perfect angels and it was perfectly acceptable, everything that happened? No, definitely not. But what we are talking about here is if there was even a little bit of assistance in getting that group going, getting that mob mentality going. And that was started or instigated by the federal government and the intelligence agencies. That's pretty big problem. That's pretty goddamn big problem. And I think that the implications of this article are essentially, what kind of country are we living in here? How much resources is the federal government spending on
attacking itself?
Yes, creating false terror attacks essentially, and then having it's really wild too the way the government and the elites and the swamp are set up right now is because they have the intelligence agency, which can either hide intelligence that something's going to happen and just let it happen so that it is politically expedient for them, or they have the resources to astroturf an event, some kind of terror attack, to start it happening and at the beginning of it. And then they've got the media on the other side of it that can make sure that the narrative is crafted. So, oh, well, Trump was kind of harassing the FBI for 4 years because they were essentially acting illegally against his candidacy during the 2016 election. And Trump was pretty hard on the FBI, as he should have been, for being essentially a rogue agency at this point. And so, to be blunt, what I think happened, and what a lot of people are saying that they think happened now that we're seeing some of this information, is it seems like to get back at Trump, to make sure that he wasn't going to be able to do anything and that he left in disgrace. I think the intelligence agencies said, you know what, Trump was so mean to us. He's bad, mean orange man, and we're going to get him back. We are going to create a fabricated terror attack, make it look like it was Trump supporters, and the media will gin up that narrative, even if there isn't any evidence, even if we do a really bad job at it, the media will go ahead and keep that narrative going. And then what happened? That's exactly what happened. So I don't, based off the coordination that we saw between the media and the intelligence state during the impeachment trial, why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't there be any kind of a coordination between these events?
I think that the FBI says they stop somewhere around 300 terrorist attacks a year, and we have two examples of recent ones that were in the media that they likely were the vast majority of those involved in planning and executing it. So that brings the question: how many of these 300 terrorist attacks were actually the FBI just ginning up their numbers by faking attacks against our own country? How much do we really need the FBI? Could other agencies is it do what their job? And really, is it worth the cost? Is it worth them being the ones who are stopping terrorist attacks from other countries if it comes with the cost of them making fake attacks against American people just to jail our citizens and to affect our political landscape? Is it worth that cost? I think not. I would rather having other state and federal police departments dealing with the investigation into and stopping of terrorist attacks, because it is not worth the juice is not worth the squeeze to have a rogue agency working against the American people.
Yeah, and that's not just Dyer just kind of spouting off. I think, or I feel that there's hundreds of these attacks could have been just wholly fabricated by the FBI, and then the FBI magically was able to solve the terror attack that they themselves created. There's actually a lot of evidence for this. Again, if you guys go out and find this article, again, it's on Revolver News, Federal Foreknowledge of the January 6th Unindicted Co-Conspirators. Go out and read it. This is a very long article. This is a very complex story. And this story isn't exactly new. Part of what this article digs up is that there's a lot of evidence, and there's been a lot of legal troubles for the FBI over the last 3 to 5 years, in that there's a lot of evidence that many, many, many times before the FBI has done exactly that, where they have been not just for the Michigan governor thing, not just for January 6th, but for many other quote-unquote terror attacks the last 20 years. The FBI has been shown in many cases and suspected in many other cases that they were the ones that they initiated the plan for the terror attack. They organized the group, coming up with the ideas, coming up with the plans. They resourced the group with money and materials, like bomb-making equipment. And in some cases, they even drove with the random people that they found on the street to locations and were there with them. You had an incident in 2016 where it is believed that an FBI agent was actually shooting at a local police officer, during a terror attack. There was another one where an FBI agent drove somebody who would go on to attempt a mass shooting to the location where he was trying to do that. You actually had, in that instance, the FBI agent was waiting in a getaway car and filming the engagement, and he filmed So the FBI made this plan. They got this. They found this random guy who's probably, having some mental troubles. The FBI convinced him to go on a shooting spree. The FBI agent drove him to the location. You guys can look this all up. I'm not crazy. I'm not Alex Jones. FBI drove him to the location. FBI agent in the car took video of the shooter. The shooter walked up to a police officer, executed him, and there's some really amazingly framed footage of a shooter executing a police officer, and that footage was taken by the FBI agent who drove that shooter to that location. So there's a lot of this history goes pretty deep. So this isn't some new conspiracy like, oh man, the FBI has really been the bad guys all along. No, this is just the latest thing in a long list of evidence that the FBI has been the bad guys all along.
Yes, and for that, all this buildup is why I believe the FBI should be disbanded, and many of the top brass should be prosecuted.
Yes, and I had a method by which I thought the FBI could be disbanded, and I think
Draw and quartered, wasn't it?
Yes, I think I'm not going to repeat that on YouTube.
Yes. Anyways, so that is the FBI, and that's why we're not fans.
Do not talk to anybody on the internet, guys, that wants to discuss. If they want to discuss any kind of violence with you, do not discuss it with them on the internet.
Hello, fellow children. How about we get together and conduct a terrorist attack? How about that? That'd be good fun.
Don't discuss it with them in person. A lot of these is some more. Again, this article is I think it's like 15 or 20,000 words long. It's just super long. In it describes another situation where I believe it was a 3%er had gotten a hotel room the night before. He was there with some other people that were part of his local militia group, and his roommate that night, who he thought was part of the militia with him, was actually also an FBI agent, and was trying to get him to do different things that he didn't really want to do the next day. So you actually have a lot of these organizations are actually already pretty infiltrated. So I don't know what that means for the future here, but I would say probably. I don't want to tell you how to live your life, but unfortunately, a lot of these militia groups, you might think, oh, I'm going to join this up, kind of get some training, or, try and find my group, my local group. Not saying don't do that. Just you got to be really, really careful with who you're talking to, and you got to be really careful with what you're talking to them about, because it seems like the FBI has a bottomless pit of money to try to entrap conservatives into whatever's going on here.
Yep.
All righty.
Next story.
I also want to remind everybody what we covered on Wednesday, I believe, was it Thursday?
It was Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Wait.
That video of Joe Biden discussing the Second Amendment and how it doesn't really matter if you have the Second Amendment because government's got nukes and F-15, so screw you. But in that, just want to remind you guys that Joe Biden was talking about, well, patriots don't need guns to go up against the government, implying that he knew, and he said patriots multiple times, implying that he realized that the patriots were on the other side of the battlefield from where Joe Biden's government was. So keep that in mind. When your enemy is calling you a patriot, you're on the right side. But be careful that they don't get you. We'll need patriots someday. We kind of need them today, but we need you to not get swept up into an FBI dragnet. So be careful.
Every time a government official says that a person with a rifle can't take down the government, I always say John Wilkes Booth would disagree. All right, next story.
All righty, so we have the expertly titled segment. Story B, Biden at G7, various clips.
He embarrassed us before the entire world. And we have a few clips to show just a few instances of him doing this. Everything he did at the G7 was one gigantic, slow-moving train wreck. And it's really hard to – it's not one single clip that shows that. But let's just start off with Biden not knowing what countries are which countries. He confused Syria and Libya, which was a pretty big deal.
They're kind of far apart. Do you want me to play all of this or just part of this?
I believe it's short.
Nope, this one's 3 minutes.
I believe his mistake is earlier.
We could work together with Russia. For example, in Libya, we should be opening up the passes to be able to go through and provide food assistance and vital assistance to a population that's in real trouble. I think I'm going to try very much hard to. It is. And by the way, there's places where I shouldn't be starting off and negotiating in public here, but let me say it this way.
Wow.
Russia has engaged in activities which we believe are contrary to international norms, but they have also bitten off some real problems they're going to have trouble chewing on. And for example, the rebuilding of Syria, of Libya, they're there.
Okay, so this is a small example of what everyone at the G7 had to deal with. He was incomprehensible. He was speaking gibberish. Going to the G7 had a few different changes to the way he's seen in America. First thing was he was actually forced to be awake and out about and seen by the media for more than 30 minutes. Whereas in America, they limit his activities to very small amounts of time so that he doesn't get tired and start losing track of things. Second, over there, a lot of our clips come from foreign media. Our media have been editing him to make him seem more comprehensible and smarter and more intelligible, which, by the way, is crazy because even back home with those short speeches and a helpful media, he still seemed like a nutcase. He still seemed like he wasn't all there. But now they have no filter. Over the G7, the entire world got to see unfiltered Joe Biden, and it was horrible. You saw that was about every one of his speeches he gave. A rambling, going nowhere train wreck. We also have another one of the part of the G7 that got a lot of attention was how the French President Emmanuel Macron was seen speaking to Biden in a very dominant way. I'll put it nicely. He was. Some people are saying he was yelling at him, or he was lecturing Vice President Joe Biden. But we don't know what was being said. But we do know that he was taking a very dominant stance, and that Biden was looking frustrated in response. And here is a very slowed down a video of the picture you've probably seen, just to show you more context.
Dad told me to play this at 25% speed. Where are we looking at here?
Where Joe Biden is sitting.
Where's he sitting at?
In the foreground.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it. I'm playing where you told me to play at.
It's at 3:08.
Let's see here.
It's quick.
Oh, there we go. I see it. Right in Joe's face.
So, that's you probably have seen the picture of him pointing at Biden or pointing at the page, and that is what was being referred to. Now, I don't know. I don't think from the picture that he's lecturing him personally, but that's one of the stories that we saw coming out of the G7. Yeah. One of the most minor ones, but obviously that's of all the things that were embarrassing. Someone being willing to speak to Biden like he's lesser than them is far less embarrassing than listening to him speak. We also had Biden, who might not know who the president of South Africa is, and here's a video from that where he tried correcting the Prime Minister of the UK, Boris Johnson.
We'll play this. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to play this.
Okay, fine. So Joe Biden attempted to correct the UK Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. So Boris Johnson was introducing the people who were going to be who were at the meeting. And Boris Johnson, introduces the president of South Africa, and then right after that, it was Civil Ramaphosa. I can't say his name. So Boris Johnson introduces him, and then moves on, and then Joe Biden says, "Oh, don't forget the president of South Africa."
Yes.
So either he is not all there, missing what's being talked about, or he doesn't know the name of the South African president who's sitting beside him.
Yeah, I think I might have found that. The clip that you gave me a clip to a link to an article, Dyer. I can't pull it up because I've got ad blockers that won't let me pull it up. I don't.
Got you.
Yeah. Hold on a second. I think I found the clip though.
And can I come to this afternoon session to order and just say how pleased I am to welcome those who have just joined us, bringing some pretty spectacular, crucial international organisations who are all areas the UN Secretary General, I'd like to say, is here, and the President of South Africa, as I said earlier.
I think that was an edited clip too. All right.
That was edited. So that they
you
cut out.
You gotta give me a YouTube clip, Dyer. I can't do other clips.
Okay. So that cut out Biden correcting him, and that was him saying again, I introduced to him already. So it just makes our country look weak. We have a president who's not mentally there, going there to represent us. We also have Biden tells Putin he can't attack 16 things in America. So Biden bragged after the summit where he spoke with the president of Russia, Putin. He was bragging about the things they discussed. And one of the things he said that they discussed is that Biden gave him a list of 16 critical infrastructure things in America that we would not allow Russia to mess with. The implication, though, is, okay, so 16 things you can't mess with, that means everything else is left on the table.
He learned that red line trick from Obama, right?
Yeah. It only works if you actually, enforce it.
Another area we spent a great deal of time on was cyber and cybersecurity. I talked about the proposition that certain critical infrastructure should be off limits to attack, period, by cyber or any other means. I gave them a list. If I'm not mistaken, I don't have it in front of me, 16 specific entities, 16 defined as critical infrastructure under U.S. policy, from the energy sector to our water systems.
That is pathetic. A strong American president would say any attack against America will be responded with a attack in kind, but more. You bomb us, we'll bomb you. If you attack us with cyber, we'll attack you with cyber harder. If you shut down any of our industry, you attack any of our companies, we will attack your companies. We will shut down your industries. Don't fuck with America.
I want to know, because I thought that the Constitution provided for the common defense of
all everything.
I didn't I'd like to see this list of 16 things, not just like what Joe Biden said. I want to see the specific list. Are the things I'm interested in, are those on there? Or are those up for grabs if the Russians decide they want to take them that day? It's
probably just what Biden cares about. Him and his buddies, the elites, their industries. They're Amazon. Oh, we can't attack Amazon. That's our company. But that company over in the states we don't care about, those red states, you can shut down their oil pipelines. That's fine.
I mean,
right?
I think the oil pipelines are on the please attack us list because
the federal government did nothing to help that company. It's a private company, but America's federal government is there to protect all of its people and also the companies.
Interesting. Kind of tangentially related to that, there was some new regulations that came out or are out for proposal, I believe, from the SEC. And they are interested in making it a federal crime for a business to pay out in cryptocurrency any ransomware, which if you're going to make it a law that these companies are not allowed to pay their hostage taker, then the U.S. government has some obligation to ensure that that doesn't happen. But as we saw with the pipeline, was it the Columbia pipeline last month? The Biden administration basically said, well, that's a private sector problem. We don't really see why the federal government should have any interest in whether or not they got ransomware attack, and we're not going to help them out. And then at the same time, now you have the government saying, well, we're not going to help you, but if you were in a position where you needed help and you try to help yourself, well, we're going to criminalize that. So that's going to be problematic here pretty quickly.
Yeah, and they said that Trump was weak on Russia, but giving Russia a blank check to weaken our country by attacking areas that are not those 16 things, and basically saying, well, these are the things I don't have the political bravery to respond to. He's basically saying, if you can attack these things. I'm not brave enough to respond if you attack them. But they said that Trump was weak on Russia. Well, Biden is far weaker. He initially called Putin a killer, but when asked to justify that statement at the G7, he floundered. Let's play that video.
In a weekend interview, Vladimir Putin laughed at the suggestion that you had called him a killer. Is that still your belief, sir, that he is a killer? And I'll continue the trend if you don't mind of asking a second question. Do you believe if he does agree to cooperate, then what kind of a challenge do you find yourself in? How would you ever trust him? And if Ronald Reagan said trust but verify, what do you say to Vladimir Putin?
To answer the first question, I'm laughing too. They actually, well, look, I mean, he has made clear that the answer is,
wow.
I believe he has in the past essentially acknowledged that he was, there are certain things that he would do or did do. But look, when I was asked that question on air, I answered it honestly. But it's not much of I don't think it matters a whole lot in terms of this next meeting we're about to have. The second question was.
All right.
That's it.
That was painful. Thank you, Adam Lupus, for the diamond. Much appreciated. So that was that's just a shutdown reboot moment. It was very concerning that he is unable to quickly come up with any response there. This is something that is amazing. The Biden administration media prep team is awful at their job. Now, I understand it's a bit of a challenge with Joe Biden because he probably can't remember the media prep that he gets, but I think Kamala Harris is at least capable of remembering things, but she's also awful at answering questions that they both know that they're going to get. Joe Biden calling Putin a killer, that's been talked about in the media leading up to this event. Same thing with Kamala being asked about the border over and over and over again. They both have probably received media coaching on that to have a quick response that they can come back with. And both of them just are incapable of delivering that, or their media teams just suck. I don't know which one it is, but with as much as the Democrat Party and the establishment have this media veneer, this propaganda machine, man, they look awful. They are awful. They have so many resources at their disposal for the propaganda, and they just cannot execute on any of them, and it doesn't even look good anymore.
I think if you even had the best media prep, he has trouble ever having the energy to do the practice sessions. He doesn't have the energy to read through the material. He often defaults to old talking points and not actually addressing what's really being talked about. He very rarely does have a press conference on a current topic that has current talking points. I don't know if you've noticed this about his speeches, but he often goes back to things he learned from previous speeches. He pulls from his career. The few times he talks about new things, those are the times where he flounders the most. and those back home tend to be very short speeches because he's had to put a lot of effort into memorizing a short amount of information.
Constantly referring to note cards and notes.
Yes,
constantly.
And that was something that he actually, when talking to Putin, had to refer to note cards about what he was going to say to Putin. Anyone looking at this can tell that he looks weak. He is not intimidating. No one's going to take him seriously. He makes our entire country look weak. And do you think that Putin is going to take any demand from Biden seriously? No. And even then, Biden did not make demands, and he wasn't even willing to call out Putin on the things he's doing to our country. Not too long ago, he was saying that Putin was trying to overthrow our government. And then this is the strongest words he has for this man who he believes was trying to subvert our democracy. Seriously? Either you don't believe that, or you don't, I think he really doesn't believe, and I also think he isn't an intimidating man. He doesn't have the balls.
This sounds unrelated, but I'll bring it back. Is you look at what we reviewed earlier this week on Wednesday with the various military leaders going woke and being upset that people called him out on it, and teaching critical race theory and encouraging that in the military. You look at all that, and that might actually be a blessing in disguise, because you think about the Chinese and the Russians looking at our military and seeing the type of leadership it has, and I bet you in their mind they're thinking, you know what? We don't need to go to kinetic war. We can just wait for another 10 years, and they will eat themselves to death on this racial hatred of themselves. So maybe
Fox, it's their strategy. They are attacking us right now.
Yeah, well, maybe counterintuitively, the military leaders also being weak would prevent some kind of war for long enough that we can get somebody else back into office and get control of the ship. Whereas if we did have strong military leaders and a weak president, that might be more intimidating than also having a weak military. Which I hate to frame it like that, but the military is as strong as its leadership is, and right now its leadership is not very strong. And Dyer has a comment on that.
I have opinions.
Well, Dyer is not going to say any of his opinions. Alrighty, so we had another Joe Biden moment.
We had a diamond. I think you missed.
Was it from
Adder Lupus? Thank you.
I definitely called it out.
Nope.
I did. You just forgot about it, you dork.
Well, let's call it out twice. Moving on.
Okay. Alrighty. So, Joe Biden is a little. When he's not forgetting what he's talking about, he's saying things that are creepy or doing things that are creepy, and you kind of wish that he would just forget what he's talking about instead. But let's take a look at what he was talking about this week when he was referring to potential stimulus bill, a potential infrastructure bill, and some recent giveaways that the Democrats just passed.
People are waiting for relief. I got them $1.9 trillion relief so far. They're going to be getting checks in the mail that are consequential this week for child care. A lot has been happened already, number one. Number two, I'm going to fight like heck to get them the rest of what I think has to be done. I'm going to be going around the country, spending time, making the case to the American people that this just isn't about showing an identification that this is who I am when I vote. This isn't just about whether or not, you can provide water for someone standing in line while they're waiting to vote. This is about who gets to judge whether your vote counted after it's been cast. Think about it. Don't dismiss it at all. Just remind them, I wrote the bill on the environment. Why would I not be for it? Employers can't find workers. I said, yeah, pay them more. This is an employees bargaining chip now.
Wow.
Pay them more.
All right, so There's a lot to unpack there because the things that he's like acting so smug about, he's essentially wrong on every single one of them. As we could spend another hour breaking down that 60-second clip, but real quickly right off the bat, saying that he got the American people $1.9 trillion. No, the American taxpayer got the American people $1.9 trillion, and it was stolen from them. And then even if you're not paying taxes, if you had any money saved at all, it was stolen right out of your savings account with inflation. Let's see here. The last part about, well, if you can't get people to work for you, you gotta pay them more. Well, that's just a big goddamn lie too. Right now, you've got the federal government is paying out over $16 an hour equivalent in unemployment benefits in some states. That's why you had, for the first time ever that anyone can possibly remember, you had several states say, no, we are rejecting federal money because that federal money was going to go into bolstering the unemployment benefits. And so you have many states across the country right now, including my own state, where unemployment benefits are not at $16 an hour equivalent because the state rejected the extra money that the federal government is trying to push out. Because when you're giving people $16 an hour to sit around and do nothing, you got to give them a lot of goddamn money to get them back into the workforce to do an actual real job. Like right now, my company does manufacturing of a certain kind, and we pay approximately $17 an hour, which is a great rate. But when it's hard work, if you could just do nothing for $16 an hour, that sounds like a lot better of a deal. So my state, knowing that we do a lot of manufacturing, we rejected that extra money, and so we are still continuing our employment. But you got a lot of states, especially liberal states, well, almost exclusively the liberal states, where they have a higher concentration of unemployment, and they're also having at the same time, counterintuitively, also a higher concentration of unfilled jobs. You have just ballooning unemployment and ballooning need for employment, and the government is using printed money and essentially universal basic income to sit in between would-be workers with jobs. It's funny because we talked a lot about the theory of universal, not like Dyer and I, but just like in general, the culture talked a lot about UBI in the last 2 years, mostly because of Andrew Yang running for president. And a lot of people are like, oh, it'll work. It would work just fine. You know, people don't really need to work. There's robots and stuff and automation now. And being somebody who's familiar with industrial robotics and does automation programming myself, I know that we're nowhere near the level of what the socialists seem to think that we're at. And we got kind of a little taste of what would it look like if we tried UBI and nobody had to go to work this past year. And what it looks like is shortages. Lots and lots of stuff are shortages because guess what? We just do not have the automation infrastructure to handle everybody leaving the workforce at once. And to be honest, we probably won't for another couple of decades. Your manufacturing jobs with human labor are going to be around for at least another generation. And that's just not the answer that the Democrats and the socialists want to hear. But we're getting it's no longer theory. You don't have to battle with one of your UBI nut friends who thinks that's just the way to go. You don't have to argue with them on a theoretical basis anymore. We have the example right now. We're living it out. So Joe Biden is wrong, and it is I don't know if it's funny is the correct word, but it is interesting that on the things that he's the most wrong about, he's also the most smug about them.
It tends to be how the left are.
Yeah, it's an inability to self-reflect or to know what you're talking about. Possibly.
Yeah. Hard to tell. All I tell you is it just makes him even more creepy, and yeah, he should definitely stop doing that. Like, it's hard to listen to him when he's doing that voice. It's already hard enough to listen to him when, like, every other word out of his mouth is a lie or him just getting a fact wrong or confusing countries. or losing what he's talking about entirely, or asking, "What am I doing here, anyways?"
What am I doing here?
Like, yeah.
Clap for that, you stupid bastard.
Yes. Alrighty. So that was Joe Biden. He is still alive. He did not die yet.
I mean, are we sure he's not a hologram? Yes, because hologram would speak better.
Yeah, I don't know if you could teach a robot to stutter.
But you
like
could
that.
teach what's his face to do it.
What?
Oh God, I lost his name. His wife's a doctor.
Huh?
The commentator who does Biden's voice really well. God damn it.
Ben Shapiro.
He's Jewish. Ben Shapiro. His wife's a doctor. Lawyer. Sorry.
No, she's
yeah.
a
So Ben
doctor.
Shapiro
Okay.
does a really good Biden voice.
Yes, he does.
So here.
He's not a robot though, not that we know of. Alrighty. So, ready for our next story?
Yes.
Alrighty. Wow, this is a really aggressive slide. Okay. We want to congratulate. This is very exciting. We're very happy. We're a little bit late.
Good news.
What's that?
It's good news.
It is news. George Floyd is he's officially past 1 year sober. Very, very happy for him. Congratulations. Woo!
Yeah.
Yeah, that happened obviously last month when he hit his 1 year sober. But we've commemorated it as a culture with multiple statues commemorating how impressive it is that he was able to stay sober for over a year. Very happy for him. So there are 2 statues so far of George Floyd that were unveiled on the 19th of June. One was to honor George Floyd achieving 1 full year of sobriety. And the other was a monument to George Floyd's amazing turnaround of being crime-free for a whole year. That's right. For over 365 days, George Floyd has not robbed anybody. He's not assaulted any women. He's not held a gun to any fetuses or pawned any fake $20 bills to any of the local small businesses. What a champ.
We're so proud.
Oh, it's just so good, man. What a heartwarming story. Let's see here. So the unveiling of the 2 monuments to his achievements and his shining example to all of society coincided with the newest federal holiday, Juneteenth. Unfortunately, these monuments, to the best the Democrats have to offer, were vandalized on Thursday by members of the militant right-wing group Patriot Front. Black paint was sprayed on the face of the statue, which I don't know if it's really a statue because isn't it like cardboard or something?
It's actually made of plywood layers, which I think if you're trying to honor someone, making a statue that is so temporary kind of seems like you don't really mean it.
Do you what kind of plywood? Do you think it was like particle board or was it like actually plywood?
It looks like from the picture like it's actual plywood.
Kind of looks to me like it's particle board. I don't know. Either way, it's gonna rot just like his soul. Let's see here. So black spray paint was sprayed on the face, which, I mean, I think that the one made out of cardboard, that kind of looks like they were whitewashing him. So I think that the Patriot Front group kind of
it's more realistic now.
They maybe fixed it.
They had made him look white, and he's just putting a realistic paint on it. I mean, I think they actually were trying to fix the statue.
I agree. Okay.
It's a good thing.
So we have this video here, and I don't know what the video is about, but Dyer, I'm sure, planned on it making sense with the text.
The other news of the night and the vandalism targeting a George Floyd statue in Brooklyn. Just 8 days after it was unveiled, the face was spray painted. The NYPD's hate crimes unit is now investigating. Eyewitness News reporter NJ Burkett is live tonight in Flatbush with the very latest.
I gotta say, one of the best takes on this on Twitter, it was so simple, and I'm sure a lot of people wrote a similar thing, but it was just like, oh wow, the police are suddenly concerned about vandalizing statues now.
Yes, that's the point.
Right, Liz, Flatbush Avenue and Nostrand Avenue. It's known here in Brooklyn as the Junction. You know, they have been scouring this monument literally for hours, using their bare hands, at times even using toothbrushes.
Could you imagine rubbing the edges of plywood with your bare hands? Oh my God.
they're willing to risk splinters to find the perpetrators of this crime.
I couldn't like if you just lightly touch the edge of plywood, you get splinters. Could you imagine rubbing your hand back and forth?
Okay, it occurred to me that if they really wanted to destroy the statue, they could just lit it on fire. They're just trying to send a message, or they're trying to actually paint it. That's they were just trying to do a good deed by painting it. Because they wanted to destroy it, they set it on fire.
I gotta say, seeing it from this angle, being able to get an ear that detailed with a plywood medium is pretty impressive. I will say that. Like the effort that went into the artisanship there was pretty. I'd say that's pretty high. That's pretty high artistic ability there. I'm certainly impressed with the technique. I don't know if the subject really captures my attention, but like the
do you think it was cut by a computer though? The layering way. It was on my computer, man.
Probably. You're probably right. Nothing's real. All right.
Sorry to
yes, the NYPD's Hate Crimes Task Force is investigating, and late this afternoon, the NYPD's Chief of Department, Rodney Harrison, told reporters that he is confident that they will find the people who did this.
They can't find that pipe bomber in D.C., but they'll find who spray painted George Floyd's face.
Yeah, exactly.
NYPD detectives are pounding the pavement on Flatbush Avenue tonight as
how many I wonder if we can look it up. Somebody in chat, somebody go look up, see if they released what the numbers were on unsolved murders in New York last week. And they've got 2 detectives working the George Floyd spray paint case. I don't know what the number is, but if I had to guess, it's probably more than 2.
Cleanup crews struggled to restore the monument. An 11-foot tall bust of George Floyd, blasted with black paint barely 5 days after it was unveiled.
It ripped my heart out. This has got to stop.
Police say it happened in the
like, this has got to stop, as though there's like an epidemic of statues being vandalized. Oh, wait, there is. It's just the first. I bet you. Where was he? Was he saying this has got to stop the 50 other statues that were taken down in the last 2 years and vandalized and destroyed?
It wasn't actually. He only cares about this one.
Oh yeah, I wonder why. And that was man. Look at that. Look at that guy. He looks like he's in a mobility scooter, and he's got the New York detectives, they'll just let anybody on the force right now. They got a black disabled guy. He's really pounding the pavement. This is hover around.
I don't think he's an agent.
I think he's pounded some quarter pounders there, not
Police say it happened in the middle of the night. The monument was defaced not only with black paint, its base was tagged with the website of a self-proclaimed...
I gotta say, the balls on these guys to tag it with their website. So Dyer and I, very carefully to phrase this, don't support what Patriot Front is doing. Don't recommend that you do that. And I'm not being ironic when I say that. But I'm not a I'm not like a red-green, like, this is good, this is bad, everything on this side is just infinitely the worst thing ever, everything on the other side is just infinitely the best thing ever. The left likes to frame everything as like one extreme or the other. Do I think that what PatriotFront.us did is the worst thing that we've seen in the last 2 years? No, I don't. Do I recommend that you do it? Also, no, I don't.
It is not on the list of. There's so many worse things to care about that a lot of things just don't register anymore. Because critical race theory far more important than someone spraying black paint on a statue honoring a wife beater and druggie who tries to pawn off fake 20s. Sorry, it's not like he's one of our founding fathers or something like that, right? Okay, so I want to point out that they were just referring to Patriot Front. You cut it off mid-sentence, but they were saying a self-proclaimed neo-fascist group. They're saying that Patriot Front refers to themselves as a neo-fascist group. So I actually looked into this to see, like, is this actually true? Is this a for realsy neo-Nazi group, right, or neo-fascist? And then the SPLC refers to them as a white nationalist group. I want to know, is that real? So I went to their website. I read their manifesto. I watched their promotional videos, and we are not promoting them, right? But I do want to counter the claim that they refer to themselves as neo-fascist. They don't. The words neo and fascist do not appear anywhere within their manifesto or their videos or any material on the website. They don't refer to themselves as that. They refer to themselves as freedom fighters who are trying to take back the country from what they view as being conquered. They are a conservative group that does direct action. They are a militant group, and they do direct action like Antifa does, right? Where they go out and they do protests, but the difference is Antifa is targeting people, innocent people, and property, whereas this group so far seems to have been targeting solely doing counter protest to Antifa and BLM and doing vandalism to their monuments. They're not going and attacking people. So we're not condoning their actions. I just want to fairly describe what they are. Their material did not say anything about white nationalism or the white race or racial, race issues. They quoted the founding fathers, and they talked about a free nation that they wanted to maintain and save. So the
other thing is the left really, they're the ones that have set the tone so far.
Right.
You're gonna get me in any way at all to be upset about a statue being tagged when what we saw, what was defended, it was defended in the Senate chambers during hearings by sitting members of Congress, sitting members of the Senate, that it was perfectly fine to be tearing down statues and vandalizing them and destroying them to what we saw the last 2 years. So all of a sudden, when it's a statue that the left likes and it gets tagged, all of a sudden that's a problem, and it's just not consistency. We're highlighting this because it's hilarious. We can think that things are hilarious without advocating for them. I personally think that this is absolutely hilarious. But it is even the part of it that makes it funny is that the left gets so worked up about it when it is a tactic that they pioneered.
The New York police are investigating the defacing of the statue as a hate crime. They're taking the investigation very seriously and are confident. They said they're confident they're going to find the individuals responsible.
Triumvirate in chat gave me some stats here. It says according to 2020 numbers, approximately there's one unsolved murder every 36 hours in New York. So over the course of the week that the New York detectives have been looking for these vandals, probably something like 7 to 10 unsolved murders have occurred. And I'm giving those numbers a little bit of a boost just because I know the national crime rate, especially murders, especially in big cities, has trended up quite substantially this year.
Yeah, so that's a great point. They definitely probably could have been spending their efforts, doing something far more important. Probably could also wait until I wasn't mid-paragraph. So the police have been taking the investigation seriously. They're confident they're going to find their people. They also wasted no time in restoring the statue. They're immediately cleaning the statue. So how does this compare to these same people, the same media, and the defacing of statues earlier in the last few years?
A statue of George Washington in Baltimore was vandalized with red paint over the weekend as protesters from across the country have been pulling down or vandalizing Confederate statues. Now they've turned their attention to statues that honor people who owned slaves before the Civil War. WMAR News' Mark Roper is near that George Washington statue in Druid Hill Park. Mark, does it look like there's been any effort to clean up that statue as of yet?
Good morning, Christian. Not as of yet, but, George Washington fought against the redcoats, as we all know, and now it is still covered with a coat of red paint. We've seen similar scenes like this in cities across the country as protests against racism and police brutality continue in the wake of George Floyd's death. Here in Baltimore at the George Washington Memorial and Statue in Druid Hill Park, you can see how it's been vandalized with red paint and the words "Destroy Racist" written at the base, along with the initials for Black Lives Matter movement.
And I'll just chime in here. So the left justified all of their vandalism against statues on the basis that these were people that terrorized the black race. Well, in modern day, I can think of few people who fit the bill better than George Floyd for terrorizing the black people in his community. That seemed to be what George Floyd did best. He had a few months, it seemed like, of maybe not doing that, maybe trying to turn his life around, but it seemed like, by and large, the majority of George Floyd's life on this planet was spent terrorizing people that looked like him. So I think that the defacement of a statue of him is in perfect alignment with the defacement of all the other statues, the reasoning why all the other statues were defaced this year and years previous.
Furthermore, they have been saying that this statue, that George Floyd and his statue are representative and symbolic of the BLM movement as a whole. And I can think of no movement that has been more damaging to black communities in Democrat cities and states in modern time than BLM, who's been burning down black communities, destroying businesses owned by black people and that employ black people, taking away their local services, just generally terrorizing those communities and calling for and successfully defunding the police that protect them, hypothetically. I could think that since this statue is supposed to represent BLM, and I say that this statue represents the modern day oppression and terrorizing of black people in America. How about that? So let's compare the importance of these individuals. Who would you say is more important to our national heritage, George Washington or George Floyd?
Washington.
Yeah, so I think that being so offended by George Floyd's statue being damaged, but not offended at all by Washington's statue being damaged, is a mismatch of importance. Also, let's compare the damage to the statues. You notice that they didn't start cleaning up the Washington statue at all, but they did immediately for the George Floyd statue. The response time for investigating the George Floyd statue was immediate, but they did not investigate or arrest anyone for damaging most of the statues.
A lot of these, there was no need to investigate. There are people doing it in broad daylight, very clearly visible. So there wasn't much need to investigate. They knew who did it. They just didn't feel like charging them. Yeah. Meanwhile, you've got literally a manhunt in New York.
Exactly. So they had no intention of arresting or holding anyone accountable for the vandalism of the statues and monuments that represented the founding of our nation and its founding fathers. But they take very seriously the vandalizing of a drug dealer who beat.
Yes. Yeah, losing Dyer just a little bit there, but I think we all kind of get where you're going with that. Dyer, are you there? Can you hear me? We seem to have lost Dyer. Direwolf has died, everybody. Alrighty. While we are waiting for him to reconnect, wait, are you back? He's not back. Okay. So, yes. So we're going to compare. All right. So we compared all this stuff. All right. So, as Dyer and I were saying earlier, we are not going to defend or advertise for Patriot Front. This is just a story about them.
That's why they will call.
You've been
What?
disconnected for like the last 60 seconds.
Fun. So
I started
Patriot
reading,
Front. We're not advertising.
I started reading this, so you can just go ahead and start reading it.
Where do you leave off?
Just start from the beginning.
Okay, so we're not defending or advertising Patriot Front. However, we will describe them honestly, unlike the news reporting. I read through the material, and I've seen what message they're putting out there, and they are not they don't proclaim themselves to be neo-fascist, and they aren't putting out white nationalist propaganda. So whatever they might be, good or bad, they are not what the SPLC or the local news was describing them as. And we know the SPLC will describe anyone who is slightly conservative as being a white nationalist or white nationalist adjacent, so I don't take their word for it.
I agree.
All right.
Okay, so our next story. Man, the slides are just on point today. Alrighty. I don't really have spots for you to read, Dyer, but I will just feel free to interject when I am finished a bullet point. Okay. All
Okay.
right, so we had we thought we had one infrastructure bill this week. So Joe Biden, his big deal that he thinks is going to be his big signature move that he's probably not going to get because he sucks, is infrastructure, because everything's infrastructure, right? Roads are infrastructure, power lines are infrastructure, wolves are infrastructure. The concept of time is infrastructure. Dr. Fauci's infrastructure. This piggy bank with oil shooting out of it, that's infrastructure too. So Joe Biden was trying to get 2 infrastructure bills passed. That's what they've been working towards the last 5 months. One was going to be physical or traditional infrastructure with like real things in it, and the other one was going to be like not infrastructure, including things like healthcare, which is an infrastructure, and like child daycare stuff, which is not infrastructure, and universal basic income and more stimulus checks, which are not infrastructure. But it had like a whole bunch of stuff in it that was not infrastructure. Republicans just straight up said, nope, we're not going to do the goofy non-infrastructure one. We're only going to do the real infrastructure one. And there was a lot of stuff, a lot of games the Democrats were trying to play with that and how they wanted to get it done. And this week we actually there was some bipartisan agreement, which I don't know why. It's still an awful bill. But Joe Biden came out on, I think, Friday and said, we sat with Republicans. We got a deal set up. We have approved and agreed upon how we want the bill to work on the main infrastructure bill. So, Biden was going to get one of his infrastructure bills, not the other one. He's going to get one of them. It's going to be a big bipartisan victory for everybody, I guess, except for the American taxpayer. And so there was much excitement, much rejoicing that we somehow were able to figure this out. And then,
I just want to clarify that whatever bill we're talking about here is going to include the printing of a bunch of money we don't have and the devaluing of a dollar, no matter what it was, no matter how bipartisan.
The rest of the story is about how we're paying for it. So just you keep that right there in your back pocket.
Oh my God.
So Joe Biden, he left off, and the markets were kind of excited about that on Friday because it was like, okay, we kind of got some stability now. We kind of got a plan. Republicans said, they were happy to negotiate with Joe. Joe said that he negotiated with them, and everybody was happy, handshakes all around. And the plan was they were going to pass this bill sometime next week. Then later on Friday, Joe Biden came out and said that he was only going to sign the main infrastructure bill if and only if it also had its companion infrastructure bill on his desk, the one with all the weird stuff, the social spending, the healthcare, and the child daycare, and the tax credits and all that stuff, or the stimulus checks and all that stuff. So the Republicans immediately came back out and were like, hey, that's not the deal that we just agreed to. Everybody agreed to a deal on one bill. You agreed to a deal on one bill. And then you're going back out to the media, Joe, and you're saying, now we're going to have 2 bills. That wasn't what we agreed upon. So the Republicans have actually, and this was like pretty recent. The Republicans have actually said they're pulling back out of the main bill, and so that one might not get passed either. I guess we'll see. Joe
Did you get the update I sent you?
What's that?
Did you get the update I sent you?
What's the update?
So, it's one of those cases where sometimes Joe's opinion isn't the same opinion as the White House.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah. So, the Washington AP says, aiming to preserve the fragile infrastructure deal, Biden says he didn't intend suggest veto unless Dem bill passes too. So he went out afterwards and through a statement to the press said, "Oh, I didn't mean to say that."
He is an idiot. And you know what? Honestly, probably happened.
He forgot.
Unfortunately, yeah. No, he probably forgot. He probably spent all day not actually in the negotiating room, right? It was probably his cabinet and different representatives. I doubt Joe was sitting there negotiating back and forth. Otherwise, it probably wouldn't have happened. That's how you know Joe wasn't in the room when the decision was made, was because some kind of decision was made. But then he probably went back out, to talk to his media in the press conference, and they told him, okay, here's what you need to say. And then he said that. And then later in the day, he forgot what they told him to say. And so he started saying the things that he wanted to say, which was not the truth. So it sounds like maybe, I guess next week, maybe they'll go back to the original deal after Joe Biden screwed that one up, which is kind of funny. But that leads us back into the question of, I didn't hear about that update until just now, Dyer, but I was actually about to just say, well, I'm pretty happy that Joe Biden screwed that up because I did not want this infrastructure bill passed, and we're going to explain why we didn't. And now that we've got that update, Dyer, we still don't want that bill to be passed because it's got some pretty bad stuff in it. What are some of the bad things in there? So, let's see here. Obviously, it's a bit cliche at this point. Republicans are always, whenever Democrats want to spend stuff, the Republicans always come back and say, how are we going to pay for this? Well, unfortunately, this time, the Democrats had a response for how we were going to pay for this infrastructure bill. A lot of it is going to be printing money, which is problematic. But that is not the part that I'm concerned about currently. So, one of the ways that we're going to pay for this infrastructure bill, which is $1.2 trillion, is that we're going to sell off some of our oil. Now, I know what you're thinking. America produces a lot of oil, and Biden has been trying everything in his power that he can do to reduce oil production. So is Joe Biden possibly going to be encouraging oil production now so that he can pay for his infrastructure bill? Is that how this infrastructure bill got bipartisan support? Possibly because, I don't know, maybe Joe Biden, maybe this is what happened, right? So Joe Biden wants to pay for the infrastructure bill with oil. Maybe he went to the Republicans and said, hey, if you pass this bill and we can pay for it with oil, I'll let you, the Republicans, I'll give you guys the ability to, allow more oil production. So you guys are happy because there's more oil production. Joe Biden's happy because there's infrastructure bill, and everybody's happy.
And our country's strong for it.
And the country's stronger for it. So Dyer, is that what happened, or are we gonna be increasing oil production to pay for this infrastructure bill? Is that what's gonna happen here?
You think so, but no. Instead, the plan is to sell 82 billion barrels of our strategic oil supply, or strategic oil reserve, that is set aside to protect our country in the case of an emergency, both from a foreign adversary or from an emergency. So instead of allowing America to produce more oil, the plan is to sell off the strategic reserve that is meant to be used for emergencies, either natural disasters, war, or economic collapse. It isn't just a piggy bank to be spent from. In fact, it is so much worse. If we had another pipeline shut down, they wouldn't have the emergency oil to help our economy continue working.
Yeah. So just to give you guys an idea of what kind of damage Biden and the Democrats and the Republican cucks that signed on to this deal, just the absurd amount of damage that they're about to do here. And I really hope that Joe Biden screwed the pooch on this one, and that this does not get traction next week. I hope that he ruined that bipartisan agreement, and I hope that this infrastructure bill does not go through. Here are the numbers on the damage here. So the infrastructure bill is planning to sell 82 million barrels out of our strategic oil reserve. That represents 13% of the strategic oil reserve of 625 million barrels. That is a lot of, you're talking about reducing the strategic oil reserve by 13%. The strategic oil reserve is supposed to keep the country going in some kind of like crazy disaster scenario for approximately 60 days. 13% is something like 2 weeks of time that you're pulling off of that reserve. That is a lot. That is absurdly a lot. We actually had story after story the last 5 years throughout the early part of the Trump administration, the late part of the Obama administration, about concerns that the strategic oil reserve was already too low and that we needed to start building out more capacity. Because guess what? America uses a lot of oil. It is the future. I know the Democrats don't like that, but not... Oh yeah, when we have a giant emergency where we're having to draw out of the emergency supply of oil, that's the time when we need to be turning to green energy. So why don't we just reduce the amount that we can pull out? I'm sure that's not going to kill millions of people if we did ever happen to need that oil.
So not only when Biden shut down oil production, shut down the Keystone Pipeline, and also he's taken other steps to reduce our domestic production. He not only made it so we were dependent on other countries for our daily need for oil, but he's also made us unable to refill our reserve without depending on other countries.
Yes. All right. So this is insane. So that is a lot of the strategic oil that we're getting rid of. That's a big chunk of safety that we will be giving up. What are we getting for this? How much of the infrastructure bill is giving up 2 weeks of emergency supply? What is that going to buy us? That's going to get us about $6 billion. $6 billion.
That's chump change compared to the $1.2 trillion.
Yeah, the infrastructure bill is $1.2 trillion, and Joe Biden wants to sell off 13% of our strategic oil reserve to pay for $6 billion of that. It would cause less damage to just print the extra $6 billion than it would to remove the 13% of our strategic oil reserve. This is, I don't know, I can't possibly conceive of a way how this isn't just a naked attempt at reducing our strategic oil supply in order to damage the country. Like, there is no conceivable reason. The benefit of the $6 billion as compared to the $1.2 trillion that's required, the benefit of that $6 billion versus the usefulness of actually having an extra almost 100 million barrels on hand in case of an emergency, it is absolutely absurd to me. That is crazy.
So emergency oil in a crisis can also, like, not having it can mean lots of mass deaths, because if you have a major disaster and oil supplies are cut off, then oil is also how you're getting food, water, and medical supplies in.
You know who we're probably selling it to, Triumvirate? We're probably selling it back to ourselves. I bet you that this is going right back into the private sector, because the private sector is a little dry right now because the oil pipelines keep getting shut down, and Joe Biden shut down a bunch of drilling on federal lands.
You know, if we just didn't shut down the Keystone, and I know you're going to go to something else here, but other than that point, we also would have more tax revenue.
Yeah, so on the Keystone, and I'm going to the numbers on this are so ridiculous. I'm going to I'll probably about 2 or 3 more times go back through the numbers again during this conversation just to reiterate how absurd this is. But some different numbers right now. So the Keystone Pipeline that Joe Biden shut down day one, now that wasn't finished yet, but it was to be coming online rather soon. The Keystone Pipeline was estimated that it would carry 830 barrels of crude per day. That would have equaled out to about 82 million barrels in about 100 days. It's been about 100 days since Joe Biden shut down the Keystone Pipeline. So he would have had his, I know that's not quite up yet. I know it doesn't work out perfectly as an analogy, but it work with me here. If Biden would have just not shut down the Keystone Pipeline, he would have already had his extra 82 million barrels. He wouldn't have had to sell it out of our strategic reserve. So, Dyer, what kind of military victory would it be for one of our enemies to be able to blow up 13% of our strategic oil reserve? Like if last week somebody attacked our strategic oil reserve, a foreign enemy, and they were able to blow up 13% of it, like how big of a disaster would that have been for us?
That'd be a massive victory
for them. For our
yes,
enemies.
for them.
For our enemies, yes.
Yes, because it'd be noticeably weakening us.
You're talking about real amounts of time here. I mean, this isn't like a couple of hours of supply. You're talking about weeks of supply. And as you pointed out earlier, Dyer, because we've shut down so much of our domestic production, we're having to rely on almost exclusively foreign adversaries for our oil supply. And now we've got 2 less weeks of slack to handle that. I think that part of what you could imagine the strategic oil reserve being used for is that we when the strategic oil reserve was conceived, almost all of our oil came from unfriendly countries that we were at war with, and I think that a big use case for the strategic oil reserve was that if for whatever reason we needed to go to war with those people, the strategic oil reserve would keep us going until we finished that war and were able to turn their pumps back on to send us oil. Other issues would be freak weather accidents or just some kind of trade imbalance or trade embargo or some kind of other large disaster or an economic collapse or something of that nature. That oil is there for a reason. As I said, there's been a bunch of articles over the last couple of years saying we actually need more of it on hand because America has not started using less oil. We actually have been using more oil because we have more and more energy requirements because it's the future. Sorry, guys. So the idea that we're reducing that is crazy. I can't conceive of any reason why the benefit of $6 billion when you're putting that up against 1.2 trillion. Again, that's was it $1,200 billion.
I also want to point out something even more absurd. If he had kept the Keystone pipeline going, pumping out 830 barrels of oil per day, and the U.S. tax revenue up per barrel is $10. So if you have $10 times 830,000 times 1 year, so 365 days, that is a tax revenue of $3,029 million. If they just did that for 4 years, he'd have the money he wanted, plus a lot more.
So
actually,
this will pay for 0.5% of the infrastructure bill. So to pay for 0.5% of the infrastructure bill, we have sacrificed 2 weeks of reserve oil supply. Goddamn, that is. I think that this. This really concerns me. So how did this come to our attention? You guys are. I'd be surprised if this is not the first time you guys are hearing about this. I've not heard any of the conservative circuits talking about this. Nobody from Legacy Commentary, New Media Commentary. I've not seen any articles about this. I've not seen anything about this on Twitter. I actually caught this this little factoid as a throwaway comment on what I thought was an unrelated video from somebody who doesn't normally do a lot of politics. They're looking at more stuff from an economic angle, and they kind of said this as a kind of a throwaway comment as part of a longer run-on sentence list that they were going through. And I heard that, and I was like, there's no way. There's no way he was planning on selling the strategic oil reserve to pay for this thing. And I went and looked it up, and I was absolutely shocked. I cannot believe that the Republicans signed on to this. I mean, this is actual treason. This is something that is very much what you would expect to see if a foreign adversary were somehow able to gain control of our political system. This is the type of moves that you would see. You start pairing this up, not looking at this in a vacuum, but you start pairing this up with other things that Joe Biden's been doing, specifically around energy. Again, very first thing that he did when he got into office was he shut down what was going to be one of the biggest pipelines, one of the biggest lifelines to making sure that North America is able to power North America, and North America doesn't need to rely on foreign sources of energy. That was going to be amazing for world security, and Joe Biden shut it down as fast as he possibly could. Immediately following that, he shut down all permits to drill on federal land, which the federal government owns like 60% of the land mass of America right now, which is absolutely absurd in its own right. But a lot of that covers oil-rich areas. It used to be that the federal government would give out leases and permits to drill on federal land, as it should. And Joe Biden's shutting that down. They aren't releasing new permits. I believe that they're attempting to shut down the current ones. At the same time that he is crippling our ability to produce oil, he is dealing with Putin to make sure that Putin is secure in supplying our, I guess, would-be allies in NATO and Europe, and securing that NATO will forever be dependent on Russian oil. I guess natural gas. Let's say energy in general. And then now you have this attempt at a nearly successful attempt, and it may yet be successful attempt, at the same time making sure our enemies are secure in their energy production, making sure that we are as crippled in our energy production as possible, now going one step further to make sure that if there was any kind of crisis at all, we don't have any energy reserves to fall back on.
And I want to point out that, to add to that, we have been through a crisis in the last year that was, the effects of that crisis were predominantly manufactured and have caused irreparable damage to our economy. And the printing of all this money, which is, this bill is just adding another, a couple trillion on top of a gigantic stack of trillions they've already printed. This is also weakening our ability, our standing globally, our weakening our economy, reducing the amount of resources available to us. If you look at the supermarket, like, there are fewer brands now. They have limited our supply, and they've made us weaker for it.
Now, what's also interesting is you see during times of high inflation or high economic instability that drives up gas prices. We saw this definitely during the 80s crises. We saw it a little bit during the dot-com bubble. We saw it during the housing crisis in 2007, 2008. We saw it a little bit under Trump. When there was some turbulence when he came into office. There is this desire, as gas prices go crazy, for if it's expected that there's a temporary reason why gas prices are going up, there's usually a request that the strategic oil reserve start opening up a little bit to pad the market so that the prices go back down, so they're a little bit more manageable. We're already seeing inflated gas prices back up to what they were when Trump was requested. Gas barely got to $3 under Trump early on, and there was a request that he open up the strategic reserve so that he could pad out the price a little bit. I don't remember what the ultimate result of that was, but either way, there was a request for it. There was definitely a request for it during the 2008 crisis, definitely a request for it back in the 80s when everything went crazy, and then there was gas shortages all over the place. We're already starting to see gas shortages. What if we get another pipeline hack like we had in Colombia, and maybe the strategic oil reserve is the only place that we can get oil at for a little while? Certainly with inflation, do you think the economy is going to be super stable? You think gas prices are going to stay right where they're at for the next 3.5 years while we wait out Biden's term? Possibly a Kamala term. Do you think gas prices are staying right where they're at, or do you think that they're going up? Do you think inflation in the economy is super stable, or do you think that they're going, well, the inflation going up and the economy going down? Do you think at some point in the next 3.5 years there's going to be a desire for people to want to pull out of that strategic oil reserve? Maybe just to pad out the economy, maybe because there's some kind of emergency. I'm going to think yes. And when that happens, we're going to have less to pull from. So maybe Biden just decides he wants to, let them eat cake, and gas prices went up to $5, and he goes, oh, you know what? I'll open up the strategic reserve. We'll let them pull out of that for a few weeks, and we'll get the gas prices a little bit more manageable, back down to like $3.50 or something like that. Let's just kind of go through this scenario. Maybe we do that for a month. We use up half of the oil reserve, and we kept gas prices nice for a few weeks, and everybody's happy. And then Putin decides to push on that red line a little bit. He's got some of his hacker groups, and they lock up Columbia gas pipeline again. Then they lock up another one that serves the West Coast, and then they lock up one that serves maybe the northern area. Maybe they do it in December when it's real cold, and they turn off the gas in Fargo, as somebody once famously predicted that they might. What then? What are we gonna do then? Well, I guess we could pull out of the strategic oil reserve. Oh wait, it's almost empty. It's almost empty, and now we can't do anything. Honestly, as a national defense mechanism, bolstering the strategic oil reserve is one of the cheapest things we can do for national security, and it is one of the most detrimental things to be reducing. I don't know. No, I do know. I do know. This is such a naked attempt at weakening America. If nothing else convinces you, this, I think, is the definitive proof that Joe Biden is acting in the interests of one of our foreign adversaries. Now, is that coordinated in some sense? I'm not getting into any of that, but for whatever reason, Joe Biden is acting specifically in the interests of at least one of our foreign adversaries, and that their interest is in us being weak, us being unable to survive any kind of emergency or any kind of turbulence. Is 13% all of it? No, it's some of it. I think that this is unprecedented. And if they're able to do it now, why won't they try it in the future? Maybe this becomes the piggy bank that the Democrats need, where they can just say, oh, well, you know what? We did 13% last time. Let's just do 14% this time. Let's just do another, 27%. We'll kind of round it back up.
If you sold the entire stock, it still would be that much money. Compared to what they're trying to spend.
Precedent, though. It sets the precedent that it's okay. That's the problem. It's okay.
The oil is far more valuable than the money. That's the thing. It's far more valuable to have an asset that protects people's lives than having the cash on hand that by itself doesn't do that. So when you're saying I want to sell 13% of the strategic oil supply, you're actually saying I want to sell 13% of the ability to give food, water, and medicine to people who are dying in an emergency.
Yes.
I'm going to sell 2 weeks worth of aid to Americans who are in crisis. That's what you're selling.
This is almost this because back at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a discussion about we actually had other strategic reserves. We had strategic reserves of masks and PPE and ventilators.
Did we?
Huh?
Did we? I thought they were used up.
Well, there was an attempt to, and that's part of my analogy here. When we went to draw on some of those stockpiles, we found out that they were, as Dyer alluded to, empty, and we wanted to know why were they empty. Oh, well, because Joe Biden and Barack Obama emptied them out, and they didn't refill them because they needed them at the time, and they didn't think of the future. They weren't saving for the future. Kind of funny that the Democrats don't save for the future, right? Kind of their MO. And I'm seeing a similar thing here where they are just emptying it out for whatever reason, because it's expedient, I guess. And they don't feel any need for us to be saving for the future, to be preparing for anything. And the same thing that happened with the masks, us running out of masks is a direct result of Joe Biden, Barack Obama policy. It took 3, 4, 5 years for that to be uncovered. I'm curious if it's going to take that long. I don't think it's going to take 5 years for us to feel the pain of this decision to try and get rid of this strategic reserve of oil. I think if this bill is successful and they are successful in selling off 13% of the strategic oil reserve supply, I think it's going to be a much shorter time than 5 years before we feel the pain of that.
Yep, I agree.
And Dyer's not going to respond to what I'm about to say, but this is I believe that any congressman signing this bill qualifies as a domestic enemy. The oath of defending America against enemies, foreign and domestic, I believe that if you sign this bill, this is counting as a domestic enemy. That is my opinion on this. This is such a severe violation of national security. I cannot believe that any of the Republicans signed on to this.
So I think that's it for the show, right?
No, we have 2 more stories.
Oh, shoot.
What?
We do. All right, I'm wrong. Sorry, let's go on.
2.5 more stories.
Jeez Louise. How long's the show been running?
Only 2 hours, 20 minutes. I mean, that's pretty short for how we normally go. I totally forgot about these 2 other stories. All right, let's move on. Alrighty. Okay, so our next story is, you guessed it. It is schools.
They did not guess it.
What's that?
They did not guess it.
I know. I guessed it though, and I was proud of myself. Okay, so you guys sure have seen. I'm sure you guys have seen some of the videos from various school boards the last few weeks. As was pointed out by, I can't remember who, but I think it might have actually been Steve Bannon. Parents are starting to realize what critical race theory is and why it's being taught to their kids. And guess what? They don't really like it. And so they have started to speak out at various school board meetings, and there was far too many examples of this to choose from. So we tried to pick out the best ones. And we'll talk about that tonight. Did you leave, or did your door just open? Diana left us. Okay, let's watch. So this first video is the aftermath of a school board meeting, which ended with several parents being arrested by the police. What's funny here is that you have a lot of people in the media and on the left saying that critical race theory in the schools doesn't exist. Yet you have parents being arrested for speaking out against it. It's a lot of legal action for something that doesn't exist.
Yeah,
let's watch.
John, walk with me, please. Walk with me, John. Now! Hey, John, please don't resist. You guys, don't resist. This is an unlawful arrest. I have a First Amendment right. Listen. You do, right? You're right. Okay, thank you. Here's someone speaking rationally. Listen to me. At this point, the meeting is over, right? It's not over. It's not over. We were meeting.
That's a... All right, so some context for that. This gentleman being arrested right here. One of many who was arrested that night. So they were at a school board meeting. The parents were letting the school board have it, saying that they did not want critical race theory being taught to their kids. They did not want their the white parents said that they did not want their white children being taught that they were oppressors and that they were bad, evil people. And the black parents said they did not want their black children being taught that they were lesser beings, always subject to the suppression by white people. Everybody was universally unhappy that their kids were being taught critical race theory. The school board, instead of allowing the parents to speak, decided to end the meeting early. So this officer douchebag, telling this guy that, oh, the meeting's over now, so your First Amendment is over. Your First Amendment is, it's abridged by the fact that there is no more meeting. Because that was a clause in the First Amendment, was that it's freedom of speech, if and only if there's a school board meeting. But this guy's saying, well, the school board meeting's not actually over, and he's correct. The school board meeting was scheduled for a certain amount of time, and only because the school board didn't want to hear what the parents had to say, they shut it down. And then this officer goes, well, the meeting's over, so you're no more First Amendment, right?
And the city rules that govern these meetings, they allow that these people are given a certain amount of time at these meetings to air their opinions. And there was 200 people there. They were lined up, ready to give their opinions on critical race theory. The board gave only a few an opportunity to speak, and then because all of them were critical of the board themselves for supporting critical race theory, they ended the meeting early, breaching their own rules to deny the people the right to speak.
Yeah. Now, we're not going too deep in tonight with what exactly critical race theory is or what it is that they're teaching kids. I think
probably already know.
Yeah, I think the audience has a deep enough existing knowledge of that. We're kind of tonight focusing on like what is the results of that with the parents at the school board meetings. And this next clip that we're going to play you, if you are a parent or have friends who are parents of children in school board meetings, or if you're on the school board or you're just active in your community, and you feel the need to do what some of these parents are doing and speaking up about it, this next clip that we're going to play you I think represents a good framework for how to go about speaking at one of these events, because as you're seeing here, a lot of these parents are just frustrated. They're not lawyers, they're not legal scholars, they're not members of the mayor's office, and they're not police officers, and they're angry about something, and they have rights to be angry about stuff, but they don't know what their rights are. And so when the police just show up and arrest them, and the police don't know what their rights are either, because these are a bunch of tools, a bunch of fat-ass tools. God, how many donuts are these guys eating? This next clip we're going to play you informs you as a parent or member of your community what your rights actually are. And we'll make sure that you guys get links to this this video or be able to look it back up, because this parent is very intelligent in how he's presenting his argument, because he also was told, oh, you're not allowed to say that, or we're going to end the meeting early, or you need to be nicer to us. And he said, no, actually I don't. And he had a bunch of case law that he was referencing. So we'll go ahead and play that now.
I'm a Pensbury School District resident. Pensbury School District.
Let me skip here.
America, he considers me a bastard because I'm in the government. His logic is sound. Now, what happened was the superintendent and the school solicitor at the time freaked out, and they didn't put the tape online the next day. And I called them up and I said, get the tape online now before we get sued for censorship. I yelled at the solicitor and I asked him what law school he went to, because it was clearly constitutionally protected rhetorical hyperbole. I can cite the case if you'd like. And I said to Paul Long, the superintendent at the time, don't ever cut the tape again, Paul. And by the way, bastard child of Margaret Thatcher, I took it as a compliment. Now, you snowflakes apparently have a bigger problem with public comment. It seems to me that you think you can supersede the United States Constitution. Well, I've got news for you, School Board President Benito Mussolini. Your power does not supersede that of the U.S. Constitution and the First Amendment rights of the citizens of this great nation. Let's be very, very clear who has the power.
Mr.
It is
Campbell,
not government policy. Do not warn me or do not interrupt my time.
That if you make personal insults like that again, or if you personally direct your comments, you will be asked to step away from the podium.
I'm going to quote to you, solicitor. I'm quoting, just a minute, do not talk over me. This is my comment, not your comment. I'm quoting to you now from the United States Supreme Court 1964 case, New York Times versus Sullivan. This is constitutional case law in this country, and I'm quoting you from the U.S. Supreme Court. The judges wrote that this nation is founded on the, quote, profound national commitment to the principle that debate on public issues shall be uninhibited, robust, and wide open, and that it may well include vehement, caustic, and sometimes unpleasantly sharp attacks on government and public officials. That's constitutional case law in this nation. I don't have to be nice to you. Nobody behind me has to be nice to you. If you don't like living in the United States of America, then you can all move to Russia, Cuba, or China. This is the First Amendment.
There you go. All right. So
well said.
This guy is Simon Campbell out of Pensbury school board during public comment. So
Pennsylvania.
Pennsbury School, Pennsylvania. Look him up. Great guy. I think that this needs to be all the points that he made. I think that needs to be kind of compressed and taught to the, I guess, conservative and parent movement out there. We got. I don't got kids in school, obviously, for certain reasons, but Dyer does and will. But I think that a lot of parents over certainly the next year, especially moving into August when school season starts again, I think a lot of parents are going to need what this guy just said, and I think that we need to get this kind of compressed down into an elevator speech in the way that he did, where you've got about a minute and a half of explaining to the school board, no, you don't get to just shut down the school board meeting because we were rude to you. No, you don't get to just talk over us. No, you don't get to just, say that we're not allowed to criticize the government, because guess what? There's constitutional case law already checked out by the Supreme Court, and, a school board meeting is not superseding the Supreme Court, obviously. What this guy said, if he had been at the school board meeting where the parents were getting arrested at, that might have gone a little bit differently, or the end result of it might have gone a little bit differently. Always remember, government officials are cowards. They may seem like they've got a lot of power, and they do, but they are cowards. If you are able to adequately describe to them that there is sharp legal consequences for them opposing you, they will back right the fuck back down.
Yep.
All right.
Because they already are taking the path of least resistance by going with critical race theory in the first place. They're caving to the angry mob because that is the easiest way. They're taking the cowards route already, and if you show that them doing that has actually the larger consequence, then they'll go with the path of least resistance. So to let them know there's a consequence. Also, there's a slight correction there. Do you see that?
Yeah, you can go ahead and say it.
All right. So let's check to make sure. Most of the individuals in the room of the previous video of the parent getting arrested, most of them were able to walk out. Only 2 parents were actually arrested. Not that any parents being arrested is okay. Just correcting how many were arrested.
Yep. Okay. So our next story. Let's see. Hold on a second.
Oh, this is a fun one.
Oh, we're back to Kamala. I mean, this might be a recurring segment. Is where in the world is Kamala Harris? This week
at the border.
This week she is in El Paso, Texas. Oh boy. All right. So
it's about 700 miles from where the border crisis is. But okay.
It's a jaunt. It's actually closer to the border crisis than Libya is to Syria, but they're not
even close to each other.
Yeah, they're pretty bad with geography.
They're separated by an ocean.
Maybe we need to have a geography test to run for government. Okay, so to kind of recap us on where we were at last time, we did Where in the World is Kamala Harris? We're going to play a little montage of Kamala being asked, when is she going to the border?
Okay. Do you have any plans to visit the border?
I'm here in Guatemala today. At some point, we are going to the border. We've been to the border. So this whole thing about the border, we've been to the border. We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. And I don't understand the point that you're making. Yes, I will. And I have before.
Do you plan to visit the border?
Not today.
Not today.
I've said I'm going to go to the border. And when are you going to the border, Vice President? The administration has asked. I'm not finished. I've said I'm going to the border.
Do you have a date?
I will keep you posted.
All right, so as impressed as I'm sure you all were that George Floyd hit 1 year of sobriety, you'll be even more impressed to learn that Kamala Harris finally made it to the border this week.
Sort of.
sort of asterisks. As we saw from the opening clip here, she physically goes into anaphylactic shock every time the border is mentioned. So get your EpiPens ready. Kamala Harris is going down on the border. You're missing your bit there, Dyer. Thanks.
Down to the border, Fox 2.
You're supposed to... Never mind. Okay. Just all right, read your next part. Thanks, Dyer.
You're welcome.
I had a great joke there, guys. Dyer.
Yeah. Anyway, after more than 100 days as border czar and weeks of not having a border trip on her schedule, and clearly not having any plans to schedule a trip, Kamala unexpectedly, last minute you might even say, headed south this week. What prompted her trip?
Well, let's watch.
How did you decide that right now was the right time to make your first trip to the border?
Well, it's not my first trip. I've been to the border many times.
As the person in charge of the response.
So,
did you see her crazy eyes? Did you see how crazy her eyes got there?
Yep. Jeez Louise.
I love how she's still trying to do this. Well, we've been to the border, and the press, I mean, it must be a meme to him at this point. Like, somebody gave him the go-ahead. This, like, no-name, like, you know, stick operator guy is, like, boom mic operator. It's like, yeah, but, like, you haven't been to the border. And then she had, like, a small Hillary seizure. Look at her. Watch her face. Watch her eyes.
Well, it's not my first trip. I've been to the border many times.
As the person in charge of the response.
What's going on? What is going on? Okay. So, alternatively, you know, because why is she going to the border for the first time? Well, she's not going to the border for the first time, guys. She's been to the border. We've been to the border.
We've
been to the border.
Royal
even Dyer and I, we've been to the border.
All of us have been to the border in spirit.
So I'm sure that they've got some kind of reason. She said something about, like, you know, human suffering and all that, whatever. Alternatively, Direwolf Media believes that the reason why she chose now was a good time to go to the border. It might have been due to a completely unrelated story of former President Trump making an announcement this week that he was going to go visit the border next week. This unexpected Kamala trip is clearly a response to Trump having his trip to the border next week. And you can be sure that if Trump had not made an announcement that he was going down to the border, Kamala Harris still would not have been going down on the border.
Isn't it amazing how Trump still lives rent-free in all of their brains? He still is pulling at their strings and making them do things.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man, that's hilarious. The part of the border she chose to go to was El Paso, Texas. This decision has wide bipartisan criticism due to El Paso being clearly a safe area that has a wall and is not affected. It was expected that if she was going to the border, she would see the crisis that she was actually, you know, tasked on taking care of. You'd expect her to go see the actual crisis area if she's there to solve the crisis, not to go to a place that's not suffering those problems. Right?
You would think.
But, you know, I think she might just be a bit of a
be...
coward.
What's that?
I think she's a bit of a coward. She doesn't want to actually provide an opportunity for a photo op for all those kids in cages that are now in Kamala cages.
She should. I mean, as much as I'm hesitant to give them advice, I almost feel like they need it at this point. But
it's so sad.
Yeah, I know it's very sad. Yeah, she probably could take some notes at an AOC book there and just, you know, go get some sad pictures of her at an empty fence next to an empty parking lot. That'd probably play pretty well.
Yeah.
What do you think Kamala did to the media that she's so terrified that they wouldn't spin it correctly for her? And actually, I think that she's right. But, like, what did she do? Who did she piss off where, like, when she does something stupid, it doesn't get spun correctly? And she has to actually, like, be mindful of what she does. Because most other Democrats don't have to be mindful of what they do and say. But Kamala kind of does a little bit.
So I think the problem is... I think that Kamala joined as vice president hoping that Biden will kick the bucket and she'd become president. And I think Biden picked her because
he the oil buckets.
I think that Biden picked her because she was the least popular Democrat candidate on the stage, and yet still has the demographics to be a positive for him. I think he picked her thinking that she wouldn't be a true competitor against him, right? And whether that's wise or not, I think that might be kind of the strategy there, is she was a safe bet for him. But I know there's been some speculation about how their two groups, their campaigns, their cabinets have not been working together or communicating very well together, and it seems like that Kamala has kind of been isolated from the Biden team and vice versa, which is kind of strange because when you had Pence and Trump, their teams worked extremely close together and coordinated their efforts as much as they could. So why isn't Kamala and Biden's teams coordinating with each other? And why is the media treating Biden, which is usually in their back pocket, the Democrats' back pocket, why is it treating Kamala and Biden differently, where they're jumping through flaming hoops to make Biden look good, but they're not doing the same for Kamala?
You know what's funny is Obama was very often criticized by the right for overusing the word "I" on items that were clearly group efforts, because he was an arrogant asshole. And then Kamala says "we" on things that are clearly she had nothing to do with. And it's funny because I think it's a similar thing where it was Barack Obama was arrogant as all get out, but Kamala is just so excluded. She has this like nervous tick to like try and shape her language to feel more included. Like, oh, well, we did that. I'm part of the group. Like, I was there too.
Well, the thing is, Kamala hasn't really done anything except for enslave black people.
That was what she's good at. Like, I'm not saying that it's good that she did that, but she really peaked at owning slaves. And I mean, she probably should have not tried to rock the boat on things that she was good at. Achievement.
Like, so in Congress, she didn't actually do anything, didn't really make any bills. She was one of the least involved senators on the Democrat side, right? She didn't achieve anything as a senator.
And I will.
She hasn't done anything.
I will point out that because that is a good point. But I will point out that actually Ted Cruz is very similar to Kamala Harris in that they are both, I guess, quote unquote, firebrands on their side of the aisle, and they both do not propose any kind of actual legislation. Ted Cruz does not propose any legislation. He will co-sign.
This is true.
And Kamala does too. So remember that on our side. Why does, obviously we're fighting the left right now. And we always are, always will be. But we do got to make sure that to have more effective fights against the left, we got to make sure we got effective leaders on the right. And Ted Cruz is one that we pick on a lot on this show because he loves to talk. He loves to write books. He loves to get a paycheck from the Daily Wire. But he doesn't really love doing the actual work. And I would fear that if we did have, if the last election had played out a little bit differently, or I guess 2 elections ago, I feel like probably Ted Cruz would have had a similar performance to Kamala Harris in a vice presidency or a presidency outfit, just because of the way he's conducted himself in Congress being very similar to the way that she conducted herself in Congress. Though I think Ted Cruz sucked a lot less dicks than she did to get to where he was.
Absolutely. So being a skilled orator is a helpful skill set.
Oh, yeah. Kamala Harris is a very skilled orator.
Yeah, so that's an important skill, but it is only one skill. It is not the most important one. It is definitely a one skill set that's good to make you a good lawmaker. But you actually need to know policy and be able to write good policy and actually propose things to actually be a lawmaker. I know it's crazy, but you need to actually, create laws.
Yes.
And refine existing laws. Actually, I would say it's far less important to make new laws right now, but it's far more important to take the laws we have and make them better. And that does require someone who understands law, and is a good writer of said laws. And being a good orator is good because you need to be able to explain it to the people, right?
Yep.
But if you only have that skill set and you don't do the other stuff, then you're not really a lawmaker. You're just a pundit.
A good example of that right now is Marjorie Taylor Greene. It's never going to pass, but she just introduced a new bill to abolish the ATF, and basically the bill would dissolve the ATF completely. All of the weapons that the ATF has seized over the years would be auctioned off to all available for all Americans to purchase, obviously through legal means, and then the proceeds would go into gun safety training courses across the country. It was a fantastic.
That would save hundreds of thousands of dogs' lives.
It was like the most amazing piece of legislation ever proposed, like since the Constitution. But it's never going to get anywhere. But she's at least Ted Cruz has never introduced a bill like that. One day I did this because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't talking out my ass about this, but I encourage you guys to go do the same. Obviously, it's all very public record. You can just go onto the Senate website and look up proposed legislation, sorted out by who proposed it. Look to see what Ted Cruz has proposed. He's proposed a lot of naming different buildings things. He's proposed a lot of naming other buildings things. He proposed a few award ceremonies for NASA. And, I mean, yes, he votes on other bills. He votes on real bills. He votes against real bills. He's amazing, or as Dyer was saying, orator in debate and hearings. But he doesn't actually turn that into anything other than it just sounds nice. But I encourage you guys, don't just take my word for it. Go check the Senate website and check to see what bills he's put forward. Unless he's put something real interesting forward in the last 3 weeks, his record's pretty sparse.
Yeah, take a look. It's in a book, Reading Rainbow. So the question is, why would he pick someone who is unpopular and has achieved nothing in a career except for
she had a black
blood.
vagina, and that was literally, he's like, I need a black vagina because I got to check boxes. And Kamala Harris was like, that's me.
So she checked the boxes, but also was not threatening as a competitor.
What's really unfortunate about that, because, and you're right that the non-competitive the non-competitive part, that is obviously the thing that sealed the deal, because a lot of people, especially on the left and the right, thought that Tulsi Gabbard would have been a fantastic vice president, but she's like a real, actually powerful woman who's got a lot of strong ideas. I don't agree with them all, but she at least has like logic and reason. She's at least consistent in her ideology. She's not just doing some kind of crazy power play. She actually believes in things. But she obviously would have outshined Biden at every turn, and she just wasn't going to be a practical candidate because Joe Biden is so weak, which really says a lot about Kamala.
Yeah, can you imagine having Biden barely able to string 3 words together next to her actually having real ideas and a logical argument?
Well, what's funny is that Tulsi on the debate stage was calling people out saying, you're talking about the wrong Middle Eastern country, and that's very important to know which country you're talking about. And now we've got the president who doesn't know even the correct region for certain countries.
Yeah. That's embarrassing.
Do we want to dip our toes into this last segment?
Nope. I have a lot to say about this, and I think we should do it on a different day.
Okay. Maybe this will be a weekday stream this week?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we were going to tonight, but obviously it's getting pretty late. So sometime this week, we want to do basically a walkaways update. I did a big, long piece on walkaways last year around this time, and actually I might make Dyer go find that and re-upload that as kind of homework before we do this one next week. But essentially, the last year has shown me very correct walkaways.
Yeah. This week, even more so.
Yeah, just kind of a quick kind of, I guess, preview for what we'll be talking about. Walkaways would be people who were leftist activists who recently converted to being, at minimum, anti-leftist, to some extent becoming conservatives or thinking that they're on the right. Do we want people to leave the left party, the left-wing parties? Absolutely. Do we want to bring people over to our side? Absolutely. The problem with the walkaways, and what I went over last year, and what we're going to go over again, because it's still true today, is that you had people who were prominent left-wing activists, people who were like actively subverting the country, actively pushing left-wing causes, that then all of a sudden cancel culture came for them and they had an awakening. And now they're on the right, and now they're at least on the anti-left, and they still want to be activists, and they still want people to follow them. And it causes problems because you have people who, as recently as 2 or 3 years ago, were on the other side of the aisle from you, advocating for your destruction, and then now they want you to follow them, and they think that they've got just the best ideas and they're the super smartest people ever. And basically the moral of the story from the last time we did this was that walkaways are dangerous. They are dangerous to the right side of the tent, because if they gain power, they will cause problems because they don't have the wisdom on the right. The left only knows how to use power to their own personal advantage in an authoritarian way. And so when they walk away from the Democrat Party or from the left and they come over to our side, if they try to gain power, they will inevitably fall back into their authoritarian ways. And the correct way for them to walk away is to come over to our side and to listen, not try to lead. Yeah. But we have several people who are trying to lead and utterly failing at it.
There's a difference between advocating for ideas because you were attacked and it was in your best interest to protect yourself to advocate for these things, and there's a difference between that and someone who advocates for these things because they have principles for which these ideas are based on.
Yeah. So maybe we could probably download that Dyer and then upload it as a premiere one of these nights.
Can do.
Okay.
Can
yeah,
do.
We'll think about doing that. Maybe Monday or Tuesday we'll premiere that segment I did last year, and then maybe Wednesday or Thursday we will do the follow-up segment for it. Other than that, you guys, unless Dyer's got anything else to say.
Nope. Dyer Wolf out.
All right. You guys have a fantastic weekend. Fox Trevize signing off.